data on a few million objects every year. And I say...
Hey, what's up, guys? So thanks for your support. I was just wanting to make some behind-the-scenes content, and Martin Willis shared this with me. So we'll watch it together. I'll give my inputs.
Even if 1 in a million is of extraterrestrial origin, that...
So this is UAP Disclosure Fund. You can see Lou Elizondo there, Tim Gallaudet, and there's Tim Burchett. Is that Representative Luna? Okay, and now Avi's talking.
It would be the biggest discovery that humanity ever made. It would mean that we have a partner. We shouldn't assume anything about the neighbor. But it would be useful to figure out what they are capable of, because we can do better. They're probably more advanced than we are if they reached our backyard before we reached their backyard. So we collected data on many, by now, millions of objects. We analyzed it. And obviously, we are happy to share the data with whoever is interested. But also, over the past decade, the first objects from outside the solar system were discovered for the first time by astronomers. There were 3 of them. The first was identified by US government satellites that are monitoring the Earth for any ballistic missiles being launched by adversarial nations. And in 2014, they noticed an object that collided with Earth and exploded with a fireball that released 1% of the Hiroshima atomic bomb energy. And they decided it's not human-made, and therefore it can be shared with the astronomy community. So NASA published a catalog of all these meteors over the past decade, and one of them was this one. We looked at the catalog and uncovered it and realized that it came from outside the solar system, because it was moving very fast. It was moving faster than 95% of the stars in the vicinity of the sun, outside the solar system. And so the question is, was it a Voyager-like probe, because it's moving so fast, or maybe just a rock from another star? That was the first one. And then the second one, in 2017, was a much bigger object. The first one was 0.5 meter in size. The second one was the size of a football field. It didn't collide with Earth. It would have been catastrophic if it did, because it would have killed us all. But it passed near Earth, within 1/6 of the Earth-Sun separation. It was observed by a telescope in Hawaii, monitoring near-Earth objects, because we are all afraid of what happened to the dinosaurs, right? We don't want to have the same fate. And they realized this object is moving too fast to be bound by gravity to the sun. And they called it Oumuamua, which means a scout in the Hawaiian language. Now, this object at first was thought to be a comet, but there was no cometary tail around it, no gas or dust. And then it exhibited an excess push away from the sun without any rocket effect of acting on it. And moreover, it had a very extreme shape, most likely flat, like a disk, based on the reflection of sunlight. The amount of sunlight reflected from it changed by a factor of 10 every 8 hours as it was tumbling. Very unusual object. So it wasn't clear. It's not an asteroid. It's not a comet. What is it? And I suggested, well, maybe it's space trash, an empty trash bag from another civilization. So that was 2017. And then, oops. And then there was, oops, I'm not sure. Okay, then there was a comet, which looked just like the comets that we are familiar with in 2019, also came from outside the solar system based on its speed.
Ryan Graves.
And my colleagues said, well, this one looks familiar, so doesn't it convince you that the others are also natural? And I said, well, if you go down the street and you see a weird person, and after that you see a normal person, it doesn't make the weird person normal.
can't see the slides. This dude's filming over here.
Oumuamua was really strange, most likely flat, and it's not clear what it was. I suggested maybe it's a very thin object pushed by sunlight, reflecting sunlight. And in fact, a lot of technological debris that we produced is being pushed by reflecting sunlight. In fact, I'm not sure, but okay. In fact, the space trash that we produced on January 2nd, 2025, just this year, an amateur astronomer noticed an object passing near Earth, and it was cataloged as a near-Earth asteroid. 17 hours later, it was realized, oh, this object moves exactly the same way as the Tesla Roadster car that was launched by SpaceX in 2018, Elon Musk. It is a car. It's not an asteroid. They removed it from the catalog. And I actually have a bet with Elon. I am willing to put 1% of my net worth against 1% of his net worth to search, to check if there is any other space entrepreneur who is more accomplished than he is since the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago. Let's figure it out. It's not a lot of money for him. And then, actually in 2020, there was the same telescope in Hawaii that discovered the Oumuamua, discovered another object that was pushed by reflecting sunlight, and then after a few weeks, the astronomers realized, oh, that's a rocket booster from a 1966 launch by NASA. So we know that some of the objects that are unusual, being pushed by sunlight, are human-made. The question is, who produced Oumuamua?
Just think of that sunlight can push things. So there's photon pressure. How does sunlight push something?
And my point is that the next Copernican revolution, remember, Copernicus realized we are not the physical center of the universe. I actually visited Poland a year ago, a day after visiting the Munich Security Conference, where I spoke as the first astrophysicist that ever, by the way, I saw on the roof of the hotel at the Munich Security Conference, there were snipers with black head covers. They were there to protect the politicians. I realized being an astrophysicist is really very fortunate, but nobody wants to kill me. But
it's overrated.
Oh, man. Wonder what Tim said.
The next Copernican revolution is that we are not at the technological center of the universe. We have something to learn from a smarter kid on our cosmic block. And I wrote a paper a couple of months ago where...
Just remember, all of the revolutions did not come from tenured PhD scientists like Avi Loeb, man. It came from the new people that just showed up and were like, hey, aren't we doing all this wrong? And they were like, shut up.
I explained that with a space telescope, we can actually go through the million objects, roughly meter in size, within the orbit of the Earth around the Sun that came from outside the solar system, and figure out whether among them, among all the rocks, there is space trash from other civilizations, because over the past billions of years, they predated us and they polluted interstellar space because we sent out 5 probes, Voyager 1, Voyager 2, Pioneer 10, Pioneer 11, and New Horizons. They are heading out of the solar system towards interstellar space. We did it over 50 years. Just think how many more we would produce in the next billion years. And all of that keeps accumulating like plastics in the ocean. All of this trash produced by other civilizations. And we just have to look in our backyard and figure it out. Again, $1 billion will go a long way in this direction. But right now, this subject is outside the mainstream of astronomy. Instead, the highest priority defined by the Decadal Survey is to to spend more than $10 billion in the search for microbes, for the molecular fingerprints of microbes in the atmospheres of exoplanets. And frankly, I'm much more excited about finding intelligence than finding microbes, for a simple reason. That
But even then, like, they found dimethyl sulfide, right? And they can just always say that there's some process that we don't understand. So I agree, like, they can always just discount it. We've already found water, we found oxygen, we found carbon, we found everything. And then now they've even found dimethyl sulfide, which is only made by phytoplankton on Earth. And yet they just discount it and say, okay, it doesn't matter. And so, yeah, it's not gonna seal the deal.
we can learn from a higher level of intelligence. One reason I seek intelligence in interstellar space is because I don't often find it here on Earth.
He's used that line so many times. It's like, but I guess people still laugh, so I guess just keep saying it, I guess. I don't know.
And you may ask, where will Voyager be in 1 billion years? It will be on the opposite side of the Milky Way galaxy. So if most stars formed billions of years before the sun, we know that for a fact, they had, I mean, if there were civilizations like us out there, they had plenty of time for their spacecraft to reach us.
I mean, think about that. So their argument right now is, he just said, we know that there were stars billions of years before the sun, because every heavy element in our solar system was created, according to our current model, was created in a supernova, right? So that was in a giant explosion, and we know there aren't heavy elements in our current sun, right? So the iron, everything that's heavier than helium, that's heavier than lithium, right, was created in a supernova. So that means that all of the heavy elements on our solar system were exploded billions of years before the sun, right? And the sun, we say, is the same age as the Earth, is 4.6 billion years. So then that means that only leaves 9 billion years before the beginning, as they say, the beginning of the entire fucking universe. And it's just so ridiculous, right? If you think about it, like how big the universe is and how tiny we are, that the universe is only 13.9 billion years. And I tried to make this example because it just shows how preposterous it is, because red dwarf stars live for trillions of years. They say trillions of years. So how is a little red dwarf star going to live for 1 trillion years? But somehow the entire observable universe, everything we can possibly see, trillions and trillions of galaxies, are only 13.6 billion years old. So they're staring, that's the Copernican revolution right there that we need, is to remove this just idiocy. It's just ridiculous. If you really think about it, 13.9 billion years, galaxies live for hundreds of billions, probably trillions of years. Just look at the scale. The fact that we honestly think that our little planet here is 1/3 the age of the entire universe is it's preposterous, right? And they're all going to look like total idiots. Sooner or later, it's going to happen.
And we haven't really checked. Until the last decade, we didn't really know about interstellar objects. So I'm saying this is new. Now,
exactly. We didn't even know about interstellar objects, right? We did not even know about interstellar objects. Think about that. Since a decade ago. We didn't even know about exoplanets 20 years ago. And yet they're so arrogant to say that, yep, the entire universe is 13.6 billion years. Oh, God, it's so painful.
Meteor, the object that collided with Earth, was interesting because for a cost of $1.5 million that I received from a donor, we were able to go to the Pacific Ocean and search for materials left over from this interstellar object. It exploded only 20 kilometers above the surface of the ocean, and that implied that it had material strength tougher than all other hundreds of meteors in the NASA catalog. So it was unusual in its material strength, in its speed, and the question was, could it be a Voyager-like meteor? Could it be a Tesla Roadster car-like meteor? Because that car actually will collide with Earth probably in several tens of millions of years. And my colleagues, if there are any astronomers at that time, they might argue it's a rock of a type that we've never seen before.
They're not going to use that
So,
propulsion.
actually, the US Space Command looked back at the data after I reached them through the White House, and they confirmed, yes, this meteor actually came from outside the solar system. The data was reliable, and they also released the light curve of the explosion that indicated how much energy was released and at what altitude was the explosion. And so I decided to lead an expedition to the Pacific Ocean. We went there slightly less than 2 years ago. And what you see here is the deck of the ship that was fittingly called Silver Star. We built a sled with magnets on both sides, and we placed it on the ocean floor, which was 1 mile deep. And we surveyed a region that is 7 miles in size, looking for any molten droplets left over from the explosion, just to figure out, was it a natural rock or maybe a gadget? And I told my students before I left, if we find a gadget and it has buttons on it, should I press a button? The opinions were split. Half of the class said, please don't do that. He put all of us at risk. And the other half said, please do. We would like to see if it's ChatGPT 100. So we brought back materials, and it was a 2-week expedition. I put all the materials in this black suitcase and shipped it by FedEx to my home, and then brought it to the laboratory of my colleague at Harvard, Stein Jacobson, who is a world-renowned geochemist that has the best instruments in the world. And on the other side of me in this photo is a summer intern, Sophie Bergstrom, who worked with me that summer, and she discovered 850 molten droplets within the materials that we brought back. And I gave her the honorary title, the Spherical Hunter. And you can see here what these molten droplets looked like. They were very distinct relative to the background sand, and we picked them up with tweezers and published the results. And so there was one type of those molten droplets, about 10% of the entire reservoir, that looked very unusual. They had a composition, a chemical composition, that was very different than solar system materials, up to 1,000 times higher abundance of beryllium, lanthanum, uranium than you find in solar system materials. And so that's a possible indication that we found some material from the original object, but we want to go back and search for bigger pieces with a robot that we will put on the ocean floor. It will cost $6.5 million. We don't have a funder as of yet. If anyone is interested in joining us, let me know. This is an image from the last day of the previous expedition, where I was standing on the ship looking at the sunset, and next to me is an 88 years old Art Wright, who was commander of a destroyer during the Vietnam War. And I really liked him because he wouldn't speak much. He would solve problems. And everything he said was true. And there aren't many people like that these days. What you find most often are people that are virtue signaling, that are trying to impress you. That's partly the culture of social media. But this mission was a success thanks to art. And he reminded me of my father. I really liked him. Now, this year, in August 2025, there is a new observatory in Chile that was funded by the Department of Energy and the National Science Foundation. It's called the Vera C. Rubin Observatory, and it will survey the southern sky every 4 nights and could find Oumuamua-like objects every few months if they are out there. And now we know to look at them in much greater detail. We can use the Webb telescope to do that. And this telescope will use a camera that is 3.2 gigapixels in resolution, so 1,000 times more than the number of resolution elements you have in your cell phone. So I'm very excited about the coming year or two. We will have new results from the observatories that the Galileo project is building. We will have potentially a new expedition where we can look for bigger pieces of this first interstellar meteor, and the Rubin Observatory might find more Oumuamua-like objects. But if we really want to make fast progress, we need more funds. If I had $100 million or $1 billion, I know exactly what needs to be done, and we can get much better understanding of our cosmic neighborhood. As I said before, the software that we develop would be of great use to the Department of Defense. Thank you.
Very quickly by Admiral Gallaudet. He'd like to say a couple words, and we're going to try to make this brief so we can go ahead and start getting to some of the questions. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and Representatives Luna and Burlison and Burchett. Appreciate you giving us all an opportunity to share what we want to share and say what we want to say about this important topic of UAP. So I'll be about 5 minutes here, maybe a little less, but today I call on the American scientific enterprise to mainstream UAP research and development. And to do that properly, I should first begin by assessing the current state of UAP research. There are a few brave individuals and organizations conducting such research, including Professor Avi Loeb through the Galileo Project at Harvard, Professor Diana Pasulka at UNCW, Drs. Gary Nolan and Peter Skafish, the Sol Foundation with Stanford University, Professor Jeffrey Kripal with the Archives of the Impossible at Rice University, and the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies. But these are by far the exception. For UAP research and scientific study is shunned by the American science community writ large. Even with dozens of credible former military witnesses coming forward, as well as legislative action from Congress in recent years, the stigma remains too great to jeopardize the reputation, promotion potential, and tenure of those in academia. To better understand this resistance, it might be useful for me to describe the state of climate science in this country, where the complete opposite is occurring. As a former administrator of the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration with a PhD in oceanography, I have studied the changes occurring in our Earth system, and while they are indeed significant, and I am by no means a climate denier, climate change is far from the existential threat that the mainstream media and some in the science community claim it to be. A false narrative has been propagated that global warming caused by anthropogenic greenhouse gases is the cause of every severe weather event on any given day. This is mainly the result of a large number of scientific studies that employ extreme and implausible emission scenarios. Lacking the expertise to critically evaluate such studies, the average citizen has readily accepted such misinformation. Conflating every extreme weather event with climate change is imprecise, incomplete, and incorrect. The most glaring examples come around every hurricane season, for which satellite data over the 50 years shows there's been no trend upward or downward of these storms. The same goes for wildfires, where news coverage always links climate change to their occurrence, but wildfires have actually been increasing in this country. So even the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has been unable to conclusively detect changes in extreme weather and climate event frequency and intensity. However, saying that we are not in fact in a climate crisis is heresy to the mainstream media and the global science community. This is the situation with UAP, but in reverse. Ample evidence, even congressional testimony, attests to the scientific validity of UAP. But the response by members of the scientific community has been either A, to bury their heads in the sand, or B, to make baseless mockery of the courageous contrarians like Professor Loeb who seek the truth. Why is this so? Well, the reason is partially due to overclassification and a deliberate, decades-long disinformation campaign by the U.S. Department of Defense and intelligence community. Unlike climate change, UAP and the non-human intelligence which control them very well could be an existential threat, as our moderator, Lou Elizondo, eloquently described in his book, aptly named Imminent. The scientific community needs to wake up to the reality of UAP, which represents the most monumental development since the Copernican revolution. Consider the extraordinary report I received this weekend. when a former U.S. Navy SH-60 Seahawk helicopter crew chief who was embarked on the carrier USS Dwight D. Eisenhower in 2021 described to me his recording on forward-looking infrared video of a metallic sphere at an altitude a few hundred feet above the ship traveling along a linear trajectory horizontal to sea surface before it accelerated into the horizon at an incredible speed, disappearing completely. Upon landing, he discussed this with some of the pilots and the other air crew before transferring the FLIR footage to the carrier's intelligence officer. Moreover, this was not an isolated event. For the Eisenhower Strike Group, during that deployment, saw many instances of UAP, primarily F-18s, frequently encountering them at high altitude. And this topic was widely discussed by the Air Wing during the entire deployment. And later, fellow aircrew members of this crew chief from another squadron deployed on board the USS Gerald R. Ford and shared similar experiences. The crew chief also informed me that the secret laptops in their ready room provided access to a shared drive where numerous UAP sightings on FLIR were archived. They stored these videos on a folder named Range Fowlers. You'd like that, Ryan. And his commanding officer and safety officer were aware of these incidents, but there was an unspoken understanding not to discuss them openly in the ready room. I have spoken to other sailors still in active duty, and their sightings of UAP have become so numerous that they are desensitized to the phenomenon. My point being that the Navy possesses a trove of video evidence and data regarding UAP, and I see no reason why FLIR footage of UAP in Navy training ranges could not be declassified and shared with the scientific community.
No reason.
With open access to more data like this, we could transform every institution of higher education by establishing a Galileo project within their astronomy and astrophysics departments, a Soul Foundation within their biomedicine and humanities programs, and an archive of the impossible in their religious studies and philosophy curricula.
Can't have that.
To close, I point out that last month at the Endless Frontiers Conference in Austin, the President's Science Advisor, Michael Krasios, committed the Trump administration to creating a golden age in American innovation. I am convinced that UAP research can not only support this, but accelerate it in ways beyond our imagination. The time to destroy the stigma associated with UAP is now. I ask the House Oversight Committee and other members of Congress to demand the DoD, DOE, DHS, and NASA release more UAP data for open science. And I call on the White House to include UAP research in its 2025 R&D priorities memo. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
I thought that was awesome. He's talking about so many videos out there. Yeah, like the Tic Tac, the recent video I shared. I didn't really like his climate science discussion. But I was looking up Avi Loeb, basically his let's just read. I can share it here. So this is from ChatGPT on what Avi Loeb's 2023 deep sea hunt for spherules. So let's look, there's 3 broad camps for IM1. This is the reaction from science, essentially. Enthusiastic, open-minded. The chemistry really is odd. Let's keep looking. So lab's own team of collaborators such as geochemist Stein Jacobson, that must be who he was talking about, who in early 2024 reported that 10% of the beads have extreme barium LA. I don't remember what LA is. I should know what that is. Uranium enrichments. That's interesting. Unlike any solar system material. So that's what Avi Loeb was talking about. Let's look at the skeptical. Interesting claim, but standard. Extraordinary claims and extraordinary evidence. The News Weekly Science headlined the claim meets sea of doubt, and quoted meteoriticist Peter Brown, the U.S. Space Command. Data Loeb relies on are opaque and error-prone. That is kind of difficult, right, to pinpoint where a meteor hits based off of like radar data from Space Command. Yeah. Nature's March 2024 news story likewise framed the debate as an alien meteor row. And then strongly critical, the beads are almost certainly ordinary micrometeorites or pollution. I remember reading this too. Planetary scientists Steve Desch and Alan Jackson posted a 40-page technical rebuttal detailing fatal flaws and showing iron isotopes point to a solar system origin. Seismologist Benjamin Fernando reanalyzed the Manus Island signal that guided the search and found it matched a passing truck. His team concludes the expedition looked in the wrong place. Astrophysicist Ethan Siegel called the episode an utter embarrassment and big think. I did see that. Where things stand, peer review is still in progress. Loeb's main compositional paper cleared technical review, but accompanying critiques are also under review. So we'll see. Follow-up cruise, that's what he was talking about. What did he need, like $6.5 million? Why don't they just go right off the West Coast? You know, Tim Gallaudet is there. Go and look off San Clemente Island and Guadalupe, right? I mean, those, I would go look down there. I mean, doesn't use the robot over there. Don't spend $6.5 million. Spend $1 million and go off the West Coast. All right. And I thought Gallaudet, his speech was pretty good. Yeah, he talked, I think he should just, why touch on climate science is such a difficult topic. You know, my buddy was visiting and there's no salmon in Alaska. Like, they can't hunt salmon anymore. So something's definitely happening. And yeah, so I don't know. I don't see the relationship. Yeah. Like, weren't climate scientists always held down in the past based on fossil fuel BS? So I don't know.
We're going to get to our first question here, and it is not scripted, and it is to my former colleague, Dr. Eric Davis. I'm going to be very careful how I ask this specific question. Welcome, Mr. Gold. Good to see you, as always. Dr. Davis, I know your background, and I know your work in our former program, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. I also know, to some degree, some of the history and first-hand experience you have on UAP. I believe that this committee and the esteemed members of Congress and the American public would love to hear, to the degree you're able to discuss it, the direct access you had. For those who don't know, Dr. Davis was, and I'll let him answer this, it was submitted into the matter of record for Congress a couple years ago, the Wilson-Davis memo. It was alleged that he was the author of it.
Yeah, what happened to that?
And if you don't know what that is, I encourage you to look it up. It has been entered as a matter of public record.
Let's get
In
Wilson
the congressional record, and it is extremely significant. This is the man. I won't say he did or he didn't. I'll let him tell you. Who authored that potentially, and furthermore, I know has had involvement in the UAP program, specifically from a crash retrieval perspective. Now, I'm going to be mindful here. Dr. Davis, please be careful of security classification, but do you mind sharing, to the degree you're comfortable with, your involvement with information related to crash retrievals and your experience?
Sure.
No, good.
Thank you. I'm an astrophysicist and also what Mark Jones at NASA and I call the breakthrough propulsion physicist. We worked on breakthrough propulsion together from 1996 to 2002, and then we continued after that to develop a book that we published through the AIAA Press in 2009, Frontiers of Propulsion Science. So my background is in advanced deep space and interstellar spaceflight, mostly faster than light propulsion through the use of general relativity theory and quantum field theory, as well as advanced nuclear propulsion, like nuclear fission and nuclear fusion. And beamed energy propulsion, which I worked on as a principal investigator for the Air Force Research Lab at Edwards Air Force Base. So I've got quite a broad background. And I began my work in UFOs, or UAP, starting in 1996, when Robert Bigelow hired me to work for him as his director of aerospace physics and astrophysics at the National Institute for Discovery Science. And that was a pretty transformative job for me, because as a physical scientist, I'm seeing for the first time odd phenomena. I'm investigating it using forensic science techniques in the field, interviewing witnesses, collecting data, and I have a team of colleagues on the staff that I work with, also PhDs, and we have a world-class science advisory board, which my former boss in Austin helped put off. was on the board of directors, was on that science advisory board, and was the last chairman of that board, actually. We also had Apollo 14 astronaut Ed Mitchell, and for a short time Apollo 17 astronaut Jack Schmidt, and we had many academicians and former CIA, national intelligence officers, social psychologists, medical doctors, and nuclear engineers, and the list goes on. We had Chuck Bellini primarily as well. So it was a really transformative because I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and I became familiar with Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan and astronomer Gordon Page co-authored a book called UFOs, A Scientific Debate, which was published by the AAAS Press. The AAAS is the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and Science is their prestigious journal that they publish. And so that was a prestigious publication. Every chapter was authored by experts in the field in academia who have studied UFOs and some angle of it from a scientific data standpoint. Data that was collected, data that was analyzed, and so they presented it and published the book. For a bizarre reason, in the 1980s, Carl Sagan had this wonderful astronomy show called Cosmos, and the companion book for that. And what's ironic is that he changed 180 degrees. He all of a sudden went from being UFOs, we have in this book that I co-authored or co-edited with Thornton Page, all of this wonderful data that's been collected that is not explainable due to conventional astronomical, weather, or man-made explanations or events or objects. I'm now calling it pseudoscience. It's fringe science. People are mistaken. Pilots have poor vision. Military pilots especially, and I've heard that from Leonard David, who's a aerospace engineering, aviation, space exploration writer, and people like him have said that our military pilots, especially the ones at the USS Nimitz, during its encounter of the Tic Tac UAP back in November of 2004, oh yes, those pilots have poor vision. They're flying, what, $20 million fighter aircraft?
More.
And they have poor vision. How did they get through the naval aviation program and Top Gun school with poor vision?
Dr. Davis, could you elaborate a little bit on your, again, to the degree that you're comfortable?
Oh, I know what you're going with. So it was a transformative issue for me, or a job. It transformed my worldview. It opened up my worldview to a lot more possibilities than what I was used to thinking. As a trained PhD physicist, I earned my doctorate in astrophysics at the University of Arizona in '99. And so I worked on 3 space missions in graduate school. The IRAS, which is the Infrared Astronomical Satellite Program, and the 2 Voyager missions to the outer planets. So as pertaining to the topic that Lou wants me to talk about, I'm not trying to avoid it. It is a sensitive subject. It's due to astronaut Ed Mitchell, Dr. Ed Mitchell, Captain USN retired. Because of him, and I won't go into a long story, but it's because of him that I got on the trail of looking for the so-called legend within the UFO community. The retrieval of crashed or landed UAP craft, or UFO craft as they were known back in those days. And by the way, UAP, the term unidentified aerial phenomenon, goes back to the 1940s even. So I followed this trail, and I ended up, over the course of the following 2.5 decades, working for Bigelow, working for the Air Force Research Lab, working for Hal Puthoff at Urtech International Incorporated, and then working at the Aerospace Corporation. So we're working in a combination of industry and classified programs that we were contracted to do on behalf of for the Defense Intelligence Agency and for the Pentagon agencies that Lou worked at, and the UAP task force that Jay Stratton led at the Office of Naval Intelligence. And so a long story short is that I came into contact with industry leaders, technical scientists, both active duty and later retired, as well as intelligence officers, generals, admirals, colonels, people who directed intelligence or human intelligence collection and analysis directorates at the DIA and the Central Intelligence Agency, who reached out to me to have me do some foreign UAP intelligence analysis and assessment. And so I have been exposed to so much in the classified realm that I can tell you definitively that there is a there. The human race, basically the world's biggest governments, like the United States, our adversary China and Russia, at least as far as I know, have had the occasion to recover craft that have either landed or crashed or both in their territory or even outside of their territories, and have taken those back to the most sensitive of their programs that they've ever had. These programs are even more sensitive and more well hidden than the Manhattan Project was, or the modern nuclear weapons industry and the U.S. military and the Department of Energy programs to maintain and upgrade and modernize our nuclear weapons arsenal.
So that's just amazing, man. Like, think about what he just said. That's unbelievable. He just said it so casually. He's like, yeah, of course we have captured craft, landed or crashed, and then they take it back and super secret.
And so this is one of the most well hidden programs. It is hidden from congressional oversight, and it always has been. And it was hidden by the action of President Eisenhower, who instituted presidential emergency action directives during his administration. These directives are not shared with Congress. They are classified. And when the Freedom of Information Act was instituted in the 70s, those are not subjected to the Freedom of Information Act request. These directives provide cover for actions that are associated with the retrieval of these vehicles and the scientific and engineering study of them. And that takes place within the industry. What happens is the Department of Defense offices, CIA offices, they create shell companies. They give a sole source contract to the shell company, who passes the money to a selected group of defense industry firms. And those firms will take that contract money and turn them around and use that as internal funding. It's called internal research and development funds, which they give to their own people inside their company, their own employees, to do the reverse engineering and analysis and study of these recovered vehicles.
Okay, so that's just amazing. So he just laid it out there. So sole source contract, what that means is you've already decided who's going to get the deal. And I want to say this is like not legal, or there's really stringent requirements on a sole source contract, because you're basically just saying, hey, we're giving you the deal. Otherwise, it goes out for a bid. And so you put an open bid out there, and then that allows many companies to actually bid on it. And this, I think, is what maybe they're fighting so hard against, is like all the companies are saying, hey, you know, Lockheed Martin or a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin, it's probably like helicopter operations. That's what I'm guessing. It's helicopter support operations. Look at that one. Like, they're just getting a sole source contract. And so it's basically just giving their buddies in the know, people like Jake Barber, his company, just saying, hey, go pick this thing up. Don't talk about it.
And so this avoids all congressional oversight. It avoids the gang of eight. And it's one of the most clever techniques used to hide it. And as far as I know, only one 4-star general and one 3-star admiral were able to locate these programs. And that's about as much as I can say. They located the programs and they uncovered them. One got a lot of resistance and hostile reception and was told that he found who he was looking for. They were who they were suspected of being. Yes, they were a UFO, UAP, crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. The other one had a lot more political power behind him because of his stature as a 4-star general. And he was able to get into the program and use his authority and his access. I think they call that a super user. The super user has access to all UAPs, special access programs. So he had his capability to be able to look into that whole thing. I was fortunate to meet Dave Dresch at the behest of Jay Stratton. Dave was a NRO liaison officer to the UAP task force, and Dave was working for his boss at the NRO, which was situated in the second floor skiffs of the Aerospace Corporation building in Colorado Springs. And I was assigned to work at the Aerospace Corporation facility in Huntsville, Alabama, because I was supporting NASA's Space Nuclear Propulsion Program office. So Jay put Dave and Dave's boss and I together, and I briefed them for 2.5 days, just the week before COVID struck. And Dave took all of my classified and proprietary information of all the investigations I did at NIDS, AFRO, and working for help put up at ERTEC, and he took that data and ran with it. And what you now know, the aftermath of that was his classified whistleblower complaint to the IG of the IC. And so there is a there. We have had this program going on in various guises, various code names. Code names change roughly every 3 years. They often shift around due to major office and programmatic reorganizations from presidential administration, or maybe every 5 to 10 years in some cases. And so these things are very old. They come in and they've gone, but they're still around. And the amount of money that's been involved, I would say since the beginning in 1944 with the first recovery in Italy, of the U.S. Army's recovery of the craft that crashed in Italy back in 1933. The United States Army, when it invaded Italy and pushed the Third Reich out, they were able to recover that craft and bring it back to Wright Airfield. And all of the crash retrievals that have taken place generally on land have gone to Wright Airfield. The majority of the crash retrievals or recoveries of whatever situation it was take place in the maritime environment. And I'm not sure where that is going. I think they're probably also going to were in those days Wright Airfield. I don't know where they're going today though, because I've only worked on the legacy history of this part of it up until about the early 2010s. And ever since the end of the OSAP and the ATIP, I don't know where those operations are going on these days.
It was interesting you said most of it's maritime. I thought that was interesting. I also didn't know they changed the program names every 3 years or so. It seems like a lot of changeover, but I guess it makes sense. And he talked about 2 4-stars there, because Admiral Tim Gallaudet, he's the highest general speaking out, and he's a 1-star admiral, and he wasn't in combat. He was a oceanographer essentially. That's why I think they kind of looked down on him, but he's only a 1-star, and he's the highest ranking. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Oh. Why more aren't talking out?
So, I think that's about it.
Is that it?
If there is a question I would always ask, and I'll just say this really easily. Leslie King and Ralph Blumenthal asked me this for an interview I gave them in July of 2020 for the New York Times article that they published. They interviewed Lou and former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. I think Harry was already retired then, wasn't he? Yeah. Okay, so I said basically my interface with the leadership at the industry, which were a number of individuals, is the following. The craft that have been recovered are not of this earth. They're not made by human hands. They are not from this planet. They are not human. They are an alien technology, whatever the word alien means. Are they extraterrestrial? We don't know. We don't know. What motives do they have? Well, we need anthropologists and social psychologists and philosophers to figure that out, because they haven't communicated that to us. So physicists like me and Avi, we cannot answer questions like motive. We just need to take data. We call it measurements and signals intelligence in the intelligence industry. And Avi I support 1,000% because we need him to do what he needs to do. UAPX is another group from the University of Albany in Albany, New York. They're doing that as well. And there are other groups out there building up their own sensor suites to try to scan the sky full-time, 24/7. To look for something that's high, and definitely not weather, definitely not an aircraft, definitely not.
But if you look, like Tedesco brothers seem to have gotten the most data, just 2 dudes in a van, and then Skywatcher, right? I mean, what is Galileo project produced really?
Kids' little quadcopter.
Well, thank you, Dr. Davis. My recommendation would be at some point here to get you in a classified setting like some of the rest of us, and you've already done that before, and have a frank conversation with some of the representatives who I think would be very interested to hear the other part of that conversation, which I'm aware of and been part of. With that said, before we go on, I wanted to thank real quick Rep. Nick Bennett for, how do you pronounce your name, sir? I apologize. Baggage, okay, forgive me, Baggage. Rep. Nick Baggage, who arrived here just not too long ago, so thank you, sir, very much. from Alabama, right from Alabama.
Alaska.
Oh, Alaska.
He's like the hub.
Sir, my humble apologies. Obviously, I'm my dyslexia instead of wrote this for me. Thank you, sir, for being here, and also great seeing you yesterday.
Sound nuts.
As far as the next question, what I'd like to do is direct this to Admiral Gallaudet. Sir, only about 50% of the seafloor has been mapped in high resolution. In fact, some have stipulated that we know even more about the surface of our own moon than the depths of our own oceans. What concrete mapping campaigns, autonomous gliders, deep sea sonars, or cabled observatories would give researchers the best chance of detecting undersea UAP activity? Up to this point, we've been discussing about the stuff we see in our skies and possibly space. But the one thing we've neglected are those observations of UAP that are underwater. And this kind of goes to the whole transmedium characteristic that we're seeing, that some of these UAP can display, particularly as a former Navy man and member of NOAA. What advice could you offer there?
Thanks, Lou. That's a great question. And in fact, I would advise us to continue what we started in Trump's first administration. And what we did is we got him to sign a presidential memorandum on mapping the U.S. exclusive economic zone. And that directed the establishment of a strategy, a plan, a national strategy, a plan, and a council, an interagency council, to contribute to the effort. And so we did this in 2020, and in the 5 years since, we've been able to go from having 40% of our EEZ map to 50%. And it involves not only using ships and sonar, but also exploring the water column with deep diving remotely operated vehicles, swarms of drones, underwater drones. I used to own 120 in the Navy, and that fleet's growing. And NOAA has a pretty sizable fleet of underwater and surface drones, and they partner with the private sector that has a vast capability as well. So I'd say we really want to expand the work that's already occurring within the government and the private sector, and target it, because most of it is targeted towards ocean science, and that's great. But if we open the aperture a bit and include UAP as a research target, I think we'll learn a lot more about the phenomena as well as the ocean.
Thank you very much. The next question we have is geared towards Dr. Avi Loeb here, and my question for you, sir, is what is your recommendation for the new generation of scientists who want to enter into this field of study but don't know exactly where to begin?
Yes, I actually gave up on the senior members of our community, and I have great hope that the young generation will approach it without any bias, because science is all about evidence and curiosity. And we lose that when we become the adults in the room. So for the young people, in fact, I was asked to establish a Galileo observatory in a new stem cell campus that will be built in Indiana. And I'm very excited about that, because those high school students and fledgling scientists would be unbiased. They would look at the data and try to figure it out. That's the way science should be done. And very often, if you assume something, if you say there is nothing out there and you are not looking, then obviously that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I very much hope that the young generation will approach this subject without any stigma, without any prejudice, without any bias, because it's of great interest to national security. And even if it has nothing to do with what lies outside the solar system, we need to figure it out. Maybe other nations have technologies that we are not aware of. And if we do find something from outside the solar system, it's the biggest discovery ever made in science. It will change our perception and our place in the universe. I had a group of religious people that came and they belong to Christianity Today, an organization, and they asked me what would be the implications to religion. And I said, well, I have 2 daughters, and when the second one was born, I didn't lose any of my love to the first one. So imagining that God can only attend to one civilization is very limiting. And I think, in fact, it would be enriching to realize that we have siblings. We might be jealous if they're more advanced than we are. Maybe they get more attention. But, that's exciting. We may get inspiration from finding something better than us. So why is it that academia, the mainstream, is shying away from this? Partly because the public cares so much about it. And, there are lots of statements that are not correct, that being made by people who have no evidence. But that should not be a reason to avoid this subject. We should study it, and young people, I think, have the ability to figure it out. If we have the resources allocated to the research, we'll figure it out. We have the equipment. It's much more exciting than figuring out what dark matter is, whether there are microbes on exoplanets, which probably exist in any warm water environment similar to Earth. I'm willing to bet that there are microbes, but I don't care much about them. I really want to find things that are better than us.
Yeah, but at the same point, why not look at the consciousness aspect of it? If so many people are already saying they can communicate telepathically, you have all these channelers, you have telepathy. You could easily do science experiments with telepathy. You don't need $6.5 million to go look for, larger spherals when your first expedition didn't really produce any real viable results, right? I mean, he's one leg in both, right? It's great he's speaking out, and he's great he's in the community, but man, he is still just in the mindset of the standard academia. What about looking out at, what about the consciousness aspect?
That we can get better, we can improve ourselves, and the young generation hopefully will do it for us if we only allocate the resources, if we don't block them, because the gatekeepers, use this technique of not funding such research, ridiculing it, and even when I went on the expedition, people said, oh, he will not find anything. Oh, he went to the wrong place. We don't believe the US government data from the US Space Command.
Yeah.
And my suggestion is just to ignore the naysayers because they are boring.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Loeb. I'm going to make this very quick. I know one of the representatives is very short on time. There's a question I'm going to ask in her presence. The question goes to Dr. Davis. We've had discussions at length in certain settings, in formal official settings you haven't been part of, or exotic material. I think it might be very helpful to the degree you can. Can you please explain what makes exotic material that has been recovered from the U.S. government exotic? What makes it different from atomically and chemically?
It's actually a very simple answer. It's the way it's fabricated. It's the way it's fabricated. That's what makes it exotic. It's not a new element that's never been discovered and placed on the periodic table of elements. No. The materials are in the periodic tables. They're either radioactive isotopes that we already know of, or they're any of the other non-radioactive, non-actinide elements on the table. It's just the combination of the materials is unusual. It could be that you could say that that's exotic, but it's the composition, it's how you built the craft, the materials that form the craft and everything inside the craft. It's quite exotic because one of the company's leadership was a young material scientist when he graduated with his doctorate in material science from one of the universities in Illinois back in 1970. And he was hired by Ben Rich to go work with him and a team at Skunkworks. That was the Advanced Projects Development Agency, I think is what Lockheed Aircraft, I think, called it back in those days. So, so basically, this is what he was telling me. He's an advanced material scientist, and he said, well, we could use the best diagnostic equipment we had back in those days, which was 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and we could see the elements through mass spectroscopy that compose these structures. But when we look at how they're composed and structured, it's like nothing we've been able to fabricate on Earth. We've never been able to reproduce it on Earth. And we have no extrapolated engineering or physics technology to tell us or inform us on how we can possibly learn how to fabricate this on Earth. So
This reminds me, I had this crazy scientist that kept emailing me and texting me and everything. He lived in Japan, and basically he said he could create a metal material, right, where he would print it. He's basically 3D printing it molecule by molecule. And so this material, this metal material, and I can't remember if it was titanium or what it made up of, could go up to 8,000 degrees Celsius, is what he said, and or even higher. So what that means is then engine thrust is all based on temperature in and temperature out. It's inlet temperature versus outlet temperature if you're talking about thrust. And so the hotter you can get the actual internal temperature, the more thrust you get. That's why the F-22 had such amazing engines, is because they actually grew the turbines, right? The turbine blades, they would grow them as one crystal. So it would actually grow, and it could take just amazing temperatures. So then they could just, instead of melting the engine now, you could just dial up the pressure and the temperature to just amazing levels, and you get amazing thrust, right? Outstanding thrust. So this dude said that he could actually print molecule by molecule. So if you could 3D print these molecules, he said our material science is way more advanced than what's let on. And that was one of what he argued was the UAP technology was how to manufacture these things, and these kind of crazy materials. He also said he had a drone that could go like Mach 20 or something, and he was talking to Israel. I don't know. Watch, he's a patron now. He's going to come after me, but that made me think of that, because how do you know that we're just not so advanced? That's the thing. Like, you could say this material is alien tech, but now the CIA and all of them can just say, oh no, this is just really advanced US manufacturing techniques, and they can always come up with a backstory for how they created it, right? Like nitinol, right? The bendable metal. So I guess that tells us it's an exotic material, but
They understood that it's the combination of the elements was very unusual. It was counterintuitive, but it's the way the materials are fabricated. That's what makes it exotic.
Excellent. Thank you very much, sir. Next question is going to go
If I can go
yes,
first.
ma'am, absolutely. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so thank you for you guys coming today. I have to get going, but I am charging Burlison and Burchett to be here and continue on while I am not here. I will say that, I mean, the stuff that you guys have all told us today, mind-blowing. And I think, going on record is even more important. So we are going to invite you back to also testify at some point. But I do have to head up, so thank you so much for your time sending this up, and we'll be back. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Okay, so the next question is going to go to Admiral Gallaudet. I've got a long list of questions. We're obviously not going to get to them all. We have to try to stay on track. So it's probably going to be my last question for this, and we could go on all day, but we've got two other panels we have to get through, and there's going to be some new information for you. Last question before the break. Admiral Gallaudet, I know that you were privy to the incidents regarding the USS Roosevelt. In fact, there's another distinguished guest we have with us here today, Ryan Graves, who's a pilot, who has been very helpful informing Congress about some of the air safety issues, because he himself has come up close and personal with one of these objects, whatever they are. Could you please provide a brief synopsis on your experience, and more importantly, what was the reaction by certain elements within the Department of Defense and some of your frustration that you experienced regarding that reporting, that type of reporting?
Thanks, Lou. Yes, I'd be glad to. So at the time of the Roosevelt UAP sightings, I was the one-star admiral in charge of all the Navy meteorologists and oceanographers, and I had aerographers mates on the ship doing the weather forecast. And as the chief meteorologist of the Navy, my responsibility was safety of flight, one of my main responsibilities. And at the time, I received an email on the Navy's classified system, secret system, and it was addressed to every subordinate under a command called Fleet Forces Command, the 4-star command that I reported to, and that the commander of the Theodore Roosevelt Strike Group reported to, as well as several other units. And attached to the email was the GoFast video that everybody's seen now and has been declassified and released to the public. And the email title was Urgent Safety of Flight Issue, and all capital letters. And it came from the operations officer of Fleet Forces Command asking if any of the recipients of the email knew what these were, these UAP, because they were having numerous near mid-air collisions, as Ryan Graves saw firsthand, his squadron mates. And then the next day, that email was wiped from my computer, and no one talked about it in any subsequent meetings at Fleet Forces Command. And this was very unusual because the primary job of Fleet Forces Command is to prepare Navy units to deploy, like the Theodore Roosevelt Strike Group. And that exercise was a critical pre-deployment requirement to get pilots certified to land on the flight deck. And so, not talking about an urgent safety of flight issue, for example, the UAP that split a section of aircraft, you don't want anything to get within a mile of an F-18 when it's operating. So that they didn't talk about it, that was covered up, didn't sit well with me. And that's the reason I have come out today, and or really for the past few years, to talk about this and make sure we support all these reasons to acknowledge and be more transparent about UAP activity and data. And that's why I'm on the advisory board of Ryan's Americans for Safe Aerospace, and we've been advocating for the FAA to institute a system of reporting with standards to get more information out there to support safety of flight and science.
Excellent.
That's a great point, because why didn't they just, if it was nothing, then why didn't they just say it was nothing? Like, okay, yeah, we figured it out. It's we had just weather balloons in the local area. You know, the fact that it was just straight covered up, yeah, it seems super sketchy to me. And I've already made the point, you know, for GoFast, where they say it's debunked using the math. And again, I would love any of these people to go and ask a technical expert in the Hornet. You know, any of the weapons officers, people that have gone to Top Gun, ask one of those guys as a safety officer even, and ask them, where did that range come from? And can you confirm that that object is where they say in the debunk video? Because it just miraculously shows up halfway between the jet and the ground. You know, that's exactly what, like, your manual bombing is an estimate. It's going to just estimate based on a model, based what's inside the software programming of the aircraft. So if it doesn't have range, it's going to throw something out there. Is it going to, though? My hunch is that it is. It's just going to throw an estimate there on where it thinks it is until it's updated with better data. But I don't know. There's little intricacies in the Hornet, different aircraft. But I know it didn't get laser ranging, and it didn't say radar ranging on there. So what happened after? You know, if they're in an exercise, they saw the thing, they had it, they must have been visual to it looking outside too. They have helmets, so they can look down and see where that thing is. Did they intercept it? You know, did they go and look at it and see what it is? Or were they held at 25,000 feet for some reason and couldn't go down there? I'd love to talk to those pilots. Either way, they don't mention gimbal at all. Like, what about gimbal? It's ridiculous.
Admiral Gallaudet, we have a question by Representative Burlison. Go ahead, sir. Floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Davis, I wanted to ask before this panel's over, I want to pull some threads here. What is your understanding of the physics or the likely propulsion technology? What is your assessment of what the capabilities are and how it's being achieved? And then also, I want to ask about materials and energy as well.
We can only speculate. These things are so far advanced, we can only speculate. The best speculation I can come up with is General Tim. He does a great job predicting something like a warp bubble. UAP do exhibit the phenomenon of sublight or less than light speed warp bubbles. However, that becomes a challenge when you talk about UAP that dive into the ocean. And climb up out of the from under the ocean and up in the air. So warp.
So it's not warping space-time.
It's a warp in space-time. Yeah,
Oh, it is.
That's described out of Einstein's general theory of relativity.
Yeah.
And so the problem.
Okay, and again, and I've talked about this, and the Copernican revolution that Avi Loeb talked about is staring us right in the face. The problem is they just accept space and time as the fundamental givens, right? So everyone, when you go to do a physics problem or a math problem in science, there was always assumptions, and you have given assumptions that you're going to answer the problem with, right? And so the given assumption that we start with is that space-time is fundamental. So when they say you're warping space-time, the question is, what is space-time, right? They don't know. They don't know. It is a given. It's a given. And so that's why you're never going to break space-time down further than c, which is the speed of light that's in everything. What does that mean? And h is Planck's constant, right? Those two things. And if you think about it, Planck's constant is related to time. So the speed of light is basically saying this distance in this amount of time. That sets your space and time boundaries, right? So those are your givens. Your givens in space-time is c and h, which is just assumed. So when people like Eric Davis, who are probably our smartest scientists, when they say it's warping space-time, like that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't. It's not warping space-time. You can't warp space-time. Space-time is just a model. So what I really think is going on is we don't understand electromagnetism. We don't understand the true nature of matter. And so what is happening is it's warping somehow the actual light. It's warping light and matter. That's what it's warping. It's not warping space-time. Space-time is not a thing, right? Light and matter is a thing that we don't understand. Space-time is not a thing. So it is warping matter, right? That's what it's doing. It's warping the interaction between the outside world and inside that bubble, whatever it is. And that's how it is able to not have a sonic boom, and that's how they're able to go underwater. So this, where they say it's warping space-time, is just like, I don't know, it's like saying fire is burning. How does it's exactly what they're saying is, how does fire work? And it burns. Fire burns stuff. Just like Aristotle, earth, air, fire, and water. It lasted for 2,000 years. It was a great model. What did it say? It says fire burns. Why? Because it's hot. That's it. It doesn't actually answer the question, right? And what the actual question of why fire burns is that it chemically alters through a combustion process, right? But you have to understand, you have to have a new model that there are atoms and that things are made up of different little tiny particles, right? And that gets you a lot further, right? It gets you another few hundred years, but it's not going to get you to where these UAPs are. It's not going to get you to bending space-time, because you know what? The fire is not just, it's burning. It's not just because fire's hot, right? In the earth, air, fire, and water, in that model, it's a given that fire burns. And in our current model, it is a given that space-time warps, and that is ridiculous. So that's what they're missing. Let's see what he says. Space-time warps, right? And he says it so confidently, like we know what we're talking about. And based on general relativity has two ways you can look at it. That space-time is actually bends, right? And light travels straight. That's what they say. They say that the space-time itself bends and light is traveling straight. So that's why they say speed of light is constant. But the math works exactly the same as if you say, no, actually, space-time, whatever the fuck that is straight, is flat. It's just there. And light bends and matter bends. The math works exactly the same both ways. But they've just gone to so many courses and they've talked to themselves. They've taught so many thousands and thousands of students, and they've written so many papers that it's just staring at them right in the face, and they just can't figure it out. And by the way, young students are not going to figure it out. They could, but what's going to figure it out very quickly is going to be AI. It's coming so fast, and it is going to solve it. It's going to solve it. Watch.
Problem is
Doesn't gravity warp space-time,
that's right.
right?
Gravity
Yeah.
warps.
So these objects,
That's right. What the fuck is gravity? They don't know, man. They have no gravity warps space-time. That's correct. That is correct, sir. And he's like, this is our smartest guys. We're going to listen. What the fuck is gravity? Explain to me what gravity is. And you can say, oh, it's an interaction between two things. Okay, that's the same thing that you're saying, what is air? And you're like, air blows, or what is fire? Fire burns things, doesn't it? Yes, that's correct, sir. Fire does burn things. Great. I'm glad we figured this out and we got to the bottom of it. That's exactly what they're saying. Like, again, gravity is just a given. When you figure out what inertia is just a given in our current space-time model. Look it up. Look where inertia comes from.
are changing space-time around them.
Yeah, they have a thin shell of energy, and the type of energy it has to be would have to be negative energy density, and it would be consistent with the type of energy density that you can create in the quantum vacuum. And examples of that are the Casimir cavity that has a little vacuum region that's bound by the two plates of the cavity. There's also squeeze states of light, where that's a laser beam, where you're going to take some part of canonical noise fluctuations from out of that part of the beam you're not interested in and pile it up elsewhere in the phase space, and this is getting really technical. So, so I'll just kind of keep it this way.
That's the thing, right? It gets to where you can't understand. It's too complicated, right? The space-time warps the space-time, and the gravity is warping the space-time because of the gravity. All right, but if you go back, it's BS circular arguments, right? The math works to describe how things are moving. Same thing talked about with Professor Simon is we know exactly how an aircraft will behave. We know if you travel this fast, then it will lift into the air, right? It will create lift. But why does it create lift? And that has literally changed since I learned it in aeronautics. It changed, right? The model changed. Now it's based on conservation of momentum, right? When I was doing it, it was based on Bernoulli's principle. And so they don't know why. It doesn't explain why. It just explains how. So space-time describes how things move, right? But they don't know what the things are. They don't know what space-time is. And we're just going to keep going around in circles till they figure it out that that they're looking at it from the wrong perspective.
You're going to take the quantum vacuum fluctuation that we know as quantum noise, shot noise, and laser beams. You're going to pile it up somewhere else in an area you're not interested in measuring. And you only want to measure the amplitude of that beam. And at that point, when you take the quantum vacuum fluctuations out of that amplitude, that energy density goes negative. And the energy density is the square of the amplitude. So that goes negative. And that's an example of negative energy. The mass of the Earth creates space-time curvature.
If it was, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, so that space-time curvature, which we feel is the force of gravity on the surface of the Earth, drags down quantum vacuum fluctuations of the quantum fields that are out in space near the Earth, in the vicinity of the Earth. And that energy density happens to be negative. And so this is an example of theoretically predicted astronomical sources of negative energy as well as laboratory sources of negative energy.
So again, you can just say a bunch of BS. It comes down to that is what we feel as gravity. So again, he's describing space-time. Again, what is inertia? Where does inertia come from? Why does mass have inertia? Why does mass have inertia? And that is not answered in space-time. It's not answered in any of our physics. And that was the whole thing that they were looking for, the Higgs boson, right? And the way you know all our understanding of it is total BS is look at the results. You get zero results. Quantum computers, zero actual results, right? How long have quantum computers supposedly been around? If they were actually doing anything legitimate or correct, then where are the results, right? There's no results because they went from a theoretical perspective to try and make these quantum computers. When if you look at our regular computers, it was built up from an engineering perspective. Same thing with fusion. Why have we had no actual fusion results, right? Because our understanding of plasma is incorrect. Our understanding of plasma space-time is totally incorrect. As soon as you get a correct understanding, then all of a sudden now you can have the breakthroughs. And that's what they're at the Demysticon this summer. That is the big argument, is that our understanding of how the sun actually creates what it's made out of is that it's a liquid sun. And that'll change our whole understanding of fusion. And from there, you will be able to get room temperature fusion. So just what are the results? All those things he's saying, it sounds great and it sounds awesome. And he's extremely intelligent, super smart. He knows all of the math. But where are the results, right? If you could really access the quantum vacuum as he's talking about and create negative energy, where are the results? And it's definitely not in the civil world. And if they're keeping it hidden, that would be amazing and miraculous. And that could be the case, but I guarantee it's related to our incorrect understanding of current physics.
That's what you would need to build a workload. And that's what you would need to build construct a shell.
Just a brief comment of clarification. We have two pillars of modern physics, quantum mechanics and Einstein's theory of gravity, which is curvature of space-time.
Right.
We don't have a reliable theory that combines
That's right.
quantum gravity. So what?
Yes, this is totally true. You actually don't need gravity in the whole quantum mechanics model, right? They don't have it. They don't even have gravity in there. And they just say, well, it doesn't play a factor. That's it. And then quantum mechanics doesn't fit into general relativity because there's no place for quantum mechanics into general relativity. They can't find it, even though Planck's constant obviously relates directly into the atomic nucleus. So yeah, they're totally separate. Think about that. There's a complete misunderstanding of our current science.
What we are hearing is speculation. We do not have the knowledge
Yep.
to figure out if you can create curvature of space-time out of negative energy density because we have never mastered this technology. We don't have an understanding of that. So it's possible that, a millennium from now we'll have those quantum gravity engineers. That's possible. Currently, we're just like too primitive technologically to figure it out.
Yes, exactly. We're not going to have quantum gravity engineers because quantum gravity is bullshit. It's like saying the caveman saying in the future we're going to have fire wielders. That's what they're saying, that our understanding is not correct. Obviously, they can go faster than light. Obviously, they can disconnect from the surrounding atmosphere and not have supersonic booms, right? Obviously, they can go extremely fast. It's something related to electromagnetics. It has to be something related, at least what we understand of electromagnetics. So instead of billions and millions of dollars, we just need to go back to simple experiments. I mean, look at that dude, Chris Chiba. He basically, how much did his little experiment cost that proved that, well, I believe he proved it. We'll see if anyone else bothers to do a secondary experiment. He basically proved that you can generate electricity from the spin of the Earth, right? That shouldn't have been possible based on our current theoretical assumptions. So basically what we... Oh, sorry about that. Basically, we need more science experiments. That was my daughter. Need to see what's going on. Going back to the basics, right? We don't need $10 billion colliders looking for something in our theoretics. Obviously, our theoretical models are not correct. What we need is basic experiments to then actually show that something works. Like Faraday, he did through basic experiments, right? Probably one of the greatest scientists ever. He wasn't a theoretical physicist, right? This whole idea of these theoretical physicists is just ridiculous. And then they don't go back to the fundamentals, So that's what we need is basic. In this case, Avi is spot on, man. He is totally correct. We are cavemen, and he does understand that. But then you'll see him step into this academia scientist, right, where we know all this stuff.
The question is there something in possession of government that the scientists should look into? And I would love to help government figure it out, because it may guide us about a theory of quantum gravity if we have something.
Yeah, so we have good ideas about these things, and we can speculate on what the best approach to take to build a warp bubble or the shell of negative energy that will create a traversable wormhole, which would be a shortcut through space-time between two distant points. But we have craft in our possession. There are no physicists literally working in those programs. They're basically mechanical, aerodynamics, aerospace, thermal control engineers, electrical engineers, and material scientists. And material science is a part of engineering often. Usually kind of overlaps chemistry as well. And they've never had a physicist like him or I. They've never had an applied physicist or an experimental physicist. And so they are really lacking in the ability to understand how these things flow.
Sir, the legacy program has been very insulated and insular, so unfortunately, it's a bit of a, forgive my approach here, but a bit of an incestuous community. There's not a whole lot of outside involvement because it is so highly classified, and that's been some of the frustration and I think challenges, technologically speaking, because we haven't been able to recently apply new talent, new ideas, new theories to what may be, what the U.S. government may be in possession of.
What about the energy potential?
The energy is a question of
Some of
some
the things we're seeing, right?
Yeah, I haven't been able to access that.
Dr. Davis, can you talk for a moment, about the Nimitz incident, the calculations for the object to go from 80,000 feet within less than a second, 50 feet over the water? What type of energy requirement are we talking about?
Hundreds of times the total electrical energy produced in the United States annually.
Yeah, and again, this is all based on kinematics. So Kevin Knut did that, right? And that's based off the radar returns from the Princeton. They basically said 80,000 feet, 20,000 feet, and then 20,000 feet, or maybe 28,000 feet down to surface level. And so I saw all the math done on that, and it's based on, again, kinematics, where you take mass, mass times acceleration. And that's how you're going to move things. But that's not how electrics work. And that's not how our current understanding of quantum mechanics work. It's, although they do have angular momentum, but it's not your simple mass times acceleration. So yeah, that shows alone that's not the energy, that's the energy if we were going to do it. If we were going to, with our current understanding of the universe and space-time, right? They say, when he says you're gonna take 2 points in space-time and you're gonna connect them, like, what the fuck is space-time? Again, what is it? Define it for me. And you can't use the word space-time in the definition, but they have to. That's my whole point. Is in order to define space-time, you have to say space-time. All they're saying is space-time is space-time. That's it. That is our current understanding of physics, and so this should highlight that our model is incorrect. That's what it should be highlighting. Like, analyzing UAPs showed me without a doubt that our current model is incorrect. And that's why I've gone nuts and all down these deep rabbit holes for the last 4 years. And I found a lot of stuff, by the way, is that our current model is incorrect. That's what should change, but people cannot change their brains. It takes a new experiment, and a new experiment was just done by Chris Chaiba, and yet no one's talking about it. I haven't even seen it in the headlines or anything, right? And so I guess you just need time, like people to die, and then the young people grow up and say, maybe that is possible. The point of dark matter, we're so wrong on dark matter. It's obviously our model. It's obviously the model. It's always been the model. I don't know. I just feel like I'm taking crazy pills, and
that's the kind of
not, by the
energy
way. I
that
have taken those.
is representative of the observed features and performances of UAP craft, especially the Tic Tac that the Nimitz encountered in November of 2004. And so it's hundreds and hundreds of times what the United States produces annually, in electrical power.
Annually.
And so that compares really well with interstellar spacecraft that would travel relativistic or ultra relativistic. Ultra relativistic being anywhere from 90 to 99% of the speed of light. The energy is astronomically huge. So these craft, I don't have the security clearances I need to know to get access to the technical details, but I am made to understand that the craft are consistent in size with the Tic Tac, even double in size of the Tic Tac. That would be up to about 100 feet long by 50 feet diameter of that type. Boomerang-shaped craft, arrow-shaped craft, triangular-shaped craft, and so forth. The biggest ones that had been observed, especially that we investigated at NIDS in 1999, involving Scott Air Force Base. That one was a 600-foot long craft, and it was about roughly 100 feet tall. And so they don't have possession of craft like that. I've never been told that. It's usually the more manned scale type.
So they couldn't move.
Yeah.
So we might be able to.
Yeah, so we can only speculate. I know Jim Caskey wrote in his book, I don't remember the title of it, but anyway, it was co-authored with Colin Kelleher, who I worked with at NIDS, and George Knapp of KLAS TV in Las Vegas. And so Jim mentioned, and Jim was the program manager for the AAS, the OSAP, the AAS WAP, I think it was. And so basically he described in his book, somebody, I don't know if it was him because he never, I think he said it was him, went inside one of these craft that he had access to, and they couldn't recognize any propulsion or power devices or systems inside the craft. It was completely unusual. Travis Taylor.
Yeah, of course, right? How are you going to get a 670 foot by 100 foot tall object using our current understanding, right? You're not. It's like you remember Spaceballs at the beginning, and they had that just giant ship, and it just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going, and then they have like the thrusters at the end, right? This is our understanding, right? This is what we think spacecraft are going to be like, and it's obviously not going to be like that, right? It's going to be like Dune, where they can just somehow they understand how the universe actually works, and they can manipulate it in ways that we can't currently understand because our models of the universe are incorrect, and they've always been incorrect looking back in the history. So the Copernican revolution that we need is the understanding that there is going to be a Copernican revolution. Like the idea should be our current model is incorrect, right? That is what we need. If you look back, that was the Copernican revolution. And before that, there was already a revolution before that. So that's what we need. Obviously, you're not going to get a giant craft from flying in like Spaceballs. So it's using some other technology. And when you go inside of a craft, and where's the turbine? You know, where do they put in the gas? Like that's what we're literally saying. Like they're not putting in the gas. Like if they're real, then I think that's why they're afraid to share any of this information, is it's going to upend everything and show that they don't know what the F they're talking about, so they better not tell anybody.
And I have speculated that possibly they're teleporting energy from a remote, distant location where the energy is produced and it's teleported to the craft. And that's
yeah, they're shipping the gas. They have a pipeline, supersonic pipeline, and they can ship the gas right to the ship, right? Yeah, that's it. Can't be our understanding of space-time.
how the craft can move around without having to carry propellant or a rocket engine or an advanced warp drive engine on it. That's one possibility that we speculated.
On the material, so what you have me thinking is carbon can take multiple forms, right? And are you saying that that is the same with other material, other elements? The way in which what we found is different forms of these elements that we have.
It would be different alloys. It would be different combinations of the elements.
And isotopic ratios as well, correct?
Yeah. So you're going to have a variety of whatever structural part of this that came off of UAP, and I don't know because I didn't have Wade Bennett knowledge SAP access. I only had TSSCI. So at the SCI level, I was informed that there would be combinations of elements from the periodic table, combinations of their isotopes. So you have a variety of elements as they naturally occur, or some isotopes of them mixed together in a certain way, and then they're structurally built in a very unusual way that even today we have no equivalent or analog to. So this is about as much as I was given information at an SCI level.
Yeah, basically it's like saying we take earth, air, and water, and we mix it around. And that's what we're talking, like, no one has said our understanding of physics is incorrect. I mean, Avi's come the closest, I guess. So I guess he did say that. He did. But then the methods that he is using is still just using our current physics. So I love what he says, but then his actions are just really strange. I don't know.
And then, do you have or can you comment on whatever species have been piloting these craft? How are they large? Are they multiple species? Are they like what is their size and how many are usually on a craft?
They're typically the multiple species. People are familiar with the Greys, the Nordics. People are talking about reptilians and insectoids. It's not that they're reptilian or insectoid, it's that they resemble to the percipient a reptile or an insect type humanoid, because they have this a head and 4 limbs and torso. So
Large, small,
human size, human scale.
and are there how many are a crew?
Well, the Greys I'm familiar with from investigating the crash at Corona, which is misnamed the crash at Roswell. It's not the crash at Roswell, it's the crash at Corona in Mexico. Those were Greys, those were 4 foot tall. And the Nordics are typically human size, probably, I've heard 5, 6 feet tall. And same with the people who mislabel reptilian and insectoid, they're roughly that height too. I haven't heard anything about anything 7 or 8 feet or 9 feet tall of that nature.
So,
Maybe that's
folks, what we're going to do here for time.
I think I stepped out at the wrong job.
We are going to take a 3-minute break for a change here of the panel. We're going to roll right into it. If you need to use the restroom, please do so. But we are going to truncate this break significantly because we've got a lot to cover. And you definitely want to stick around for this next panel as well. Big round of applause for our panelists, please. Some of these folks have a plane to catch, so they might have to get out of here quick.
okay. I need to figure out how to live stream. Oh, look at that. Steve Bassett. Who else is there? Let's see. Martin Willis. I saw Leslie Kane. There's Ryan Graves. Let's see. Yeah, all the usual suspects: Chris Mellon, Steve Bassett, Leslie Kane. I wonder if they know they're on live TV right now. I should be live streaming this. Damn it. But then I wouldn't be as... I wouldn't talk as much trash. I think it is good. At least there's one kind of mainstream physicist out there, like Avi, talking about this. And he brought up a good point. I think that's Keith. Taking a photo with Tim. I wonder who they're going to have on the second panel. We didn't know about it. There's Mike Gold. Okay. So they're going to have Mike Gold in there. Tim Burchett's still there. Too bad Rep Luna had to leave. Yeah. It is nice not being live. I can just say what I want. At the same time, though, probably thousands of people. I saw 1,200 people watching on Vetted live. I thought I recognized her. All right, I'm going to leave the sound up, and then I'm going to go use the bathroom and see what's going on with my kids. That's the problem. I live in Portugal, so all this stuff's like dinner time, and I have to take care of everything. All right, I'll be back.
Take your seats, everybody. We're about to begin.
Okay, I'll just have to do it next time. I canceled StreamYard because if you guys noticed, like several months ago, my audio kept getting delayed, like messed up. So I was just tired of StreamYard, ended up canceling it. The good thing about StreamYard is you could live stream pretty easily. I knew how. So I just haven't done it in OBS. It's what I've been using lately. I don't want to. I'm signed up for UAP Disclosure Fund too. It's a shame. I talked to Elizondo.
All right, folks, we can shut that door. We're going to get rolling here. I want to be cognizant of the representative's time.
We got Chris Mellon.
All right, folks. The next part of this panelist discussion will involve national security. Before we begin, I would like to share something with you. This has not been planned.
The sound.
And I just received permission to share this with you this morning. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you now is because I think it's important and relevant to this next conversation with these two individuals who I'll introduce to you in a minute.
Oh shoot! Sorry guys.
Very relevant to this conversation.
Followed me around. What did you guys see my?
We talk about national security a lot.
Damn.
They're pilots. They're men and women in uniform who bravely fight wars for us, in combat. There's a whole sector out there that we all have.
Behind the scenes, I can't hear what he's saying. I can't read lips either. He's talking about national security.
They shared with you a photograph that has never been made public. It was taken in 2021 over the Four Corners region at an altitude of approximately 21,000 feet by a private pilot outside of his aircraft. And this is a photo. I'll give a copy for Congress to see. It was taken by we have all the information on the camera, and I just received permission today to share this with you. It is a lenticular object, and when you look at the shadow being cast, it is significantly large. This is an altitude of 21,000 feet.
Okay, so that looks like that Tic Tac.
Now, why is this important? I'll pass this around.
Turn up the volume.
The copy here, Kirk, when you're finished as well, please pass it on down to them. This is taken from a civilian pilot, right? Not a FLIR system, not an infrared system, but an average person with an average camera at 21,000 feet. And
21,000
the
feet
object
with a camera.
potentially is anywhere between 600 to 1,000 feet in diameter. It's a lenticular object, and it is silver. Now, I cannot vouch for the veracity of this photograph. I didn't take it. But this is an example of one of many, many, many incidents involving commercial and private pilots. And guess what? They don't know where to report it. Guess what? Congress has no idea that this is happening on a regular basis. That's a problem. And why is this relevant? Because right now you're going to hear from two speakers. I'll introduce you to them in a moment. Who are experts in national security and have been following this topic for some time.
So he said he can't vouch for the veracity of it.
To Mr. Chris Mellon, first and foremost. Chris Mellon is well, I'd call him a former boss's 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 boss. He was a senior staff director, if I'm not mistaken, here in the Senate at the time with Bill Cohen, Senator Bill Cohen, and then later went to the Department of Defense and became the first, what you might call the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. The position before there was a DASD, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, where basically Chris was responsible for all the intelligence equities globally.
Yes.
Globally for the Department of Defense, right? Anything from human operations to special access programs and everything else. Chris has been a spearhead in public engagement, getting the academic community, the scientific community, everybody, intelligence community, all to apply their efforts and time and talent and resources to this very real problem. The next individual is Mr. Kirk McConnell, former senior military officer as well, and very senior staffer on the Senate side for the Senate Armed Services Committee, who was instrumental in helping get Dr. Eric Davis to provide classified briefings to certain members of Congress. I won't say who, that's not my place to say. Kirk has been in the shadows for a very long time, and he has been extremely effective in getting this topic at the highest, to the attention of the highest levels of our government. And that to include other administrations as well, not just this one and the one before, but the one before that as well. So with that said, there's a whole lot more to go, and I could spend probably half an hour going over their academic vitae and their accomplishments, but rather what I'd like to do is spend some of that time instead and allowing them to have a discussion with you here today and some questions. I think Chris Mellon first has a presentation he'd like to provide. So I'm going to give the floor to Chris Mellon. Please welcome our new panel. Would you like to present?
Yeah, maybe I'll come up there. Project a little better. Thank you, Lou, for that overly kind introduction, and my thanks to the congressmen for taking time out of their busy schedules to be here with us, and everyone else who contributed, especially Jordan Flowers. I just returned from South America for about 4 weeks, and promised I would not work on anything related to UAP the whole time, and got back here and made a quick turn, a little under the weather. Wouldn't have a briefing if it wasn't for Jordan and his assistants. What I want to talk about is I don't think the public is aware of the extent of our airspace vulnerabilities and failures and the degree to which they've already been exploited and are being exploited today, and the challenge that we face in trying to sort this out. I also want to pivot a little bit based on earlier conversations. I wasn't going to get into this so much, but Dr. Loeb talked about spending $1 billion or so to develop new sensors to collect information. One of my career frustrations in the intelligence community has been that we have incredible sensors that are far more than $1 billion, and we have a great many of them. And they are collecting information today which is directly pertinent to this topic, but that information is not reaching Congress, it's not reaching the scientific community. In many cases, I don't think it's reaching AARO, which is the office that Congress established to study and evaluate this phenomenon. So if we could have the first slide, please. Was this going to do that for me? Yeah, so here's just a little overview of topics I'm going to touch on, which is the word shocking, I think, is not an exaggeration or hyperbole in this case. We really are effectively naked from an air defense standpoint when it comes to these drones. I'll talk and provide very specific examples to illustrate that, and the UAP. Let me begin here. Okay, this is unfortunately I don't have this right in front of me, but this is a map that displays roughly simply the coverage provided by something called the solid-state phased array radar system. These are reportedly the most powerful emitters on the planet. If there are other civilizations in nearby solar systems, they're more likely to detect these emitters than probably anything else on our planet. How many UAP would you guess they have detected in, say, the last 20 years that have been reported to AARO?
Zero.
Zero. How is it possible that the most powerful radar, I've been writing about this for years, by the way, fecklessly. This is not a new point. I've been trying to get Congress, somebody in Congress to listen to this and pay attention for years. And Kirk will testify to that at the Armed Services Committee, because I keep going up there and have been for years saying, guys, how come this thing never detects any UAP? How is that possible?
They don't exist.
These are the most powerful emitters on the planet. And look at the area they cover. And oh, by the way, when you look at the area they cover, we keep having reports over and over again from tactical systems, from ships, plane, and aircraft in the areas covered by these radar.
Yep.
So Aegis ships,
Nimitz.
planes flown by Mr. Ryan here and his naval aviator colleagues and others are reporting UAP constantly in these areas, but somehow these systems never seem to see a UAP ever. How is that possible? And how come nobody's asking about that? Is this a Chinese balloon situation where all we need to do is tweak the filters, and lo and behold, we're going to bring into focus something which is, drones, if nothing else, they're a vital, absolutely vital air security significance. We know that in Russia and Ukraine today, drones are causing more casualties and killing more people than any other weapon system. Right? So this is utterly transformed warfare as we know it. Here's a multi-billion-dollar system. It's up and running. This is the successor to the old ballistic missile early warning system. So its primary function is to detect ballistic missiles coming over the poles from Russia or China or from North Korea and to develop intercept solutions. But it also has a mission of detecting sea-launched cruise missiles and bombers and so forth.
That's what detected the Tic Tacs and the
One of
Nimitz.
several possibilities. Either we've spent billions of dollars on a system that's not performing as it should be, or it just, maybe needs some tweaks in the filters to expand the range of things it reports on. One of the challenges with these systems is to avoid clutter, right? Because they're so powerful, they collect so much. They've got to filter it down so what's being displayed is reasonable and appropriate to the mission. It could be a problem of that sort. Or it's simply so highly classified that the information is not reaching AARO. I favor the latter. I think that's what's going on. And I think if Congress were to poke hard on this, maybe get an Inspector General to look at these possible options, or otherwise look into this, they would get some answers.
Quick question. Is that data from that system being archived?
I believe so. I don't know how far back they go and how that's a great question. I don't know how far back it goes.
He said it's the data archived.
One of the things, so when you approach NORAD about this with the Air Force, and you start asking about this data, and what are they seeing? So right now, my understanding is, by the way, that they don't even tell AARO, whose director is supposedly cleared for everything, they don't even tell him when they scramble fighter aircraft to conduct intercepts. So they're regularly scrambling fighter aircraft. I've talked to and interviewed on television a NORAD officer who told an account of walking into Cheyenne Mountain where he, for duty, and everybody was standing on their feet looking at the big screen, and there was a UAP coming down from the Arctic along the east coast of the United States. And the commander-in-chief of NORAD said, quote, I want that thing. And everybody said, yes, sir, and they were launching everything we had on the East Coast. Couldn't get it near it, couldn't get a radar lock. It disappeared out over the southern Atlantic. Is that the only time that ever happened? There was one time that this NORAD officer gave this account from the 1990s when the system was much less capable than it is today, and we were seeing fewer things than we are today, and fewer intrusions over restricted airspace. I rather doubt it. This is, by the way, only one of a number of multi-billion-dollar systems that are already deployed. They're collecting data that bears directly on this topic and don't seem to be reporting anything to AARO. So AARO issued a report. In their last report, they said, we don't have anything, haven't seen any UAP in space, but there were, I think, 40 instances in which ground-based reporters, like civilian airline pilots, reported things far above, beyond what they call the Kármán line in 100,000 feet, which is what they consider outer space for these purposes. Now, there's another system called the ground-based electro-optical deep space surveillance system, which is a ring of cameras circling the globe that does nothing but stare at the night sky all night long. How come those systems didn't detect what these pilots are talking about? They're looking up saying, I saw these bright lights moving, et cetera, et cetera. Well, there's one of these cameras on top of one of our highest peaks in Hawaii, and it does nothing but stare at the night sky. That same night sky all night long. Did it miss that? Was it a cloudy night? Have any of those cameras ever collected one of these incidents? They said there were 40. I would think somebody ought to take an inventory and say, we want to know which of these surveillance systems is reporting UAP and which are not, and what specifically are they reporting? Take an inventory. Again, is there a systemic problem or failure with these systems? The taxpayers spending billions of dollars, I would think we would want to know that. Now, interestingly, with regard to the GI system, I, on one occasion, had a colleague who was visiting for a sort of routine oversight purpose many years ago. And I said, while you're there, Pete, why don't you ask them if they ever seen anything strange? I didn't want to say flying saucer, but that's what I was alluding to. And he knew what I was talking about. So he asked the question, and sure enough, just a month before, on that one occasion when the question was asked, they had indeed collected photographic imagery of what was 4 or 5 objects moving through the night sky in formation, traveling parallel to the Earth's surface. I don't know that the question has ever been asked since. That was probably 20 years ago. I find it hard to believe that in all that time that they haven't collected anything relevant to this question. And I don't understand why that data is not getting to AARO, and I don't know if anyone has even gotten a checklist to make sure that when Congress issued this directive and said, there's a reporting requirement now, everybody needs to report this stuff, it needs to go to the Air Force, it needs to filter down through the commands. Is anything coming back up from these systems? Do these people even know they're supposed to report? And is there any reporting of that kind going on? There's another system called the Space-Based Infrared System. Multi-billion-dollar system. This is, again, in the unclassified domain, what I'm talking about here. There's quite a bit, additionally, that is paid for by the taxpayer that's pertinent. It's a very robust system with satellites in multiple orbits, highly elliptical orbits, geospatial orbits, very high precision. It's looking for infrared and heat kinds of events. As far as I know, they have detected, reported to AARO 0 UAP incidents. Okay, maybe nothing happened. Maybe they haven't seen anything, but it does make you wonder. In this case, it's particularly strange since we know there are dozens, if not hundreds, of UAP incidents happening within the areas that this system is supposed to be providing coverage of. For example,
That's a great point. I mean, if you just remember back to Kirkpatrick Pant's briefing, right, when he said, "Here's all the UAP we're seeing. They're mainly round orb spheres, and they're just littered with it, right, right within the radar regions covered by all of our national defense radars that Chris Mellon's talking about." John Ramirez brought this up, you know. So how can they not be seeing any of these things? And my biggest still question is, why will no one ask about the Nimitz or gimbal? Like Ryan Graves is there. Is it secret? Do we really have like gimbal drones? And that's why they don't want to bring it up. But there's no way we have the Tic Tac. They said, you know, did someone come up and say, oh, by the way, that's ours? Is that why they don't ask about it? I mean, and then just say it's ours. Like, fine. Like, wouldn't that do what you want for the military? I mean, wouldn't that improve America's power? Wouldn't people be more scared of, you know, it doesn't make any sense. What about Nimitz? What about gimbal? It's obviously something, obviously it's going on. I mean, it's obvious.
the famous Nimitz incident occurred, excuse me, almost directly in front of the radar at Beale Air Force Base, right off the coast, and this went on for about a week or so, and you had objects descending from 60,000 feet and back up. So I don't think anyone could say, well, they were so small and they were so close to the water, it wasn't within range of the radar. These things were at very high altitudes, and this was going on a sustained basis. So my suspicion is, now I understand that data could be highly classified. I could understand why it might not be in the public domain. What I can't understand is why AARO does not seem to be aware of this data, if it exists, and why the appropriate congressional committees do not seem to be aware of and informed of this. Do I realistically expect anything to happen because I'm raising this here? No, because I've been doing this for years. But what the heck? We're here, might as well try again. Let's go on to the next slide. So we have an incredible series of events that have been happening. I wrote an article a year ago to this month called "Who's Operating the Drones Plaguing the U.S. Military?" And it did actually get read by a producer for 60 Minutes, who subsequently did a piece which featured several four-star officers who in fact confirmed what I was discussing and alleging in the article with regard to the events that occurred at Langley Air Force Base and elsewhere. And it is truly shocking. Here's the Air Combat Command, which is supposed to be protecting these gentlemen in this institution where we're sitting, in Capitol Hill, in the White House, in the U.S. government, and they can't protect their own airspace. They have to move our cutting-edge F-22 fighter squadron to a Navy base from the Air Force Base. And this is going on for, I forget how long it was, a couple of weeks roughly. And we're talking about strange craft, bright lights appearing over this base, making it unsafe to fly night after night after night.
But that's just research drones, right? I mean, it's just research drones. Just research drones. Next.
And to this day, we have no idea where they were coming from. We don't know their capabilities. We don't know who was controlling them. And that remains true, not just for that base and that incident, but for numerous other bases. So the first incident, and the war zone is a great source for people interested in this topic, by the way. Terrific reporting. 2018 in Guam, we've installed a $1.5 billion anti-ballistic missile system. And these brightly lit small craft show up, they go right to the THAAD missile battery, and they're shining bright lights down on it like they're photographing. And this happens 2 nights in a row. So back in 2018, it wasn't as apparent as it is now, but obviously those drones could have been weaponized. They could have easily taken that battery out and eviscerated the ballistic missile defense on our leading facility in the Pacific. Not to mention the fact, I just went to that to Google Maps this morning to check that air base, and that air base, like Langley and like so many others, has very few hardened shelters. So those multi-$100-million aircraft that are on the runway could easily be destroyed by drones that are costing, what, a few $1,000? Okay, that's how vulnerable we are. Then in 2019, we began to see this activity off the coast of the United States in California. And I'll read a little excerpt from one of those reports. USS Paul Hamilton observed 4 UAS with a closest point of approach approximately 200 yards off the bow, port and starboard beams. They had a on-time station of approximately 2 hours and 20 minutes. So if you have children and you have drones at home, you know that they usually have a maximum time of about 20 minutes. Okay, these were in station for 2 hours and 20 minutes, 60, 80 miles off the shore, not apparent where they could have been launched from and what their total dwell time was. The anti-UAS systems on the ship were ineffective in bringing them down. The first UAS spotted by lookouts at 2:40, observed with a single white light. They go on to report others within 500 yards, maneuvering fore and aft with 4 white lights and a flashing red light. They're not trying to be sly. They're not trying to be clandestine. Approximately 200 yards above the ship, again, maneuvering right around the ship, back and forth, up and down. They went to the bridge of the ship with a powerful searchlight or photographic device. So we've had cases where they go right up to the bridge of the ship and shine a bright light in on the captain and the senior crew. That's how overt and provocative this is, and that apparently reflects their degree of confidence that we can't intercept them and bring them down.
Exactly. Why would you do that? Why would you be overt if you're trying to monitor? You know, if you listen to Matthew Brown, when he gets the image of the Russian surface vessels, it's from a submersible, hidden, right? It's not out flying right up to it, shining a light in. That sounds exactly like what happened to Eric Delgado. If you remember, that's one of my most popular interviews. Amazing story. And the light came down. He was flying a commercial aircraft, and it shined a light right through the cockpit, like this super bright light. He said went right through the cockpit and down the plane. Like, why would you have lights on these things? It doesn't make any sense.
Whatever it is that's operating. That same year, we began to see them around nuclear power plants. In 2020, very strange situation out west. This went on not just for weeks, this went on for months. In one of the least densely populated, there's a slide that kind of shows, I think maybe it's back,
It's research
roughly the part of the region we're talking about here. Yeah, eastern Colorado and western Oklahoma. So we're talking about farmland. I drove out west of Keene last winter and drove kind of through the area. It is incredibly sparsely populated. There's very, very, very little there, and yet these drones were operating in groups, clusters, as many as 40 drones at a time, they formed this was so extensive and there was so much eventual furor raised among the ranchers and farmers that they formed a task force involving the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, local law enforcement. They deployed a special plane that the governor of California authorized that had sensors on it. And this continued to occur, and we never found out where these things were coming from, who was operating them. I called a sheriff there and spoke to him about it. He told me a fascinating story. He said he was actually a deputy sheriff, but the sheriff was also a witness. They responded to a call, and there were a group of these lights over this farm, and a brighter light came in, a larger light, and the smaller lights went inside of it. And it took off at an extreme velocity and passed almost directly over the sheriff and the deputy. And he told me, I've never seen anything move that fast. He's also in the military reserves, this individual. So, and that report, by the way,
It's research.
he called it a mothership. It's not just a story that I happen to hear. If you look at the documentation from Air Force Office of Special Investigation, the FBI, and so forth, you'll see written documentation from other witnesses that refers to a mothership. So this is actually well documented, very strange and very concerning. We don't know what is operating in our airspace, and this continues, often in militarily sensitive areas.
They know it's there.
2023, Arizona test ranges. You've heard about Langley, but we do a lot of flying in the Southwest. Flying conditions are great. It's a terrific place for the Air Force. We have large Air Force bases there. And some of the strange things we're seeing in the number and the rate and frequency with which this is happening is extraordinary. So this includes, now your average drone is restricted to a flight of 450 feet. We've got F-35s and F-22s, well in this case F-35s. They're encountering drones at 15,000 feet, 17,000 feet, 35,000 feet, going 500 miles per hour.
So that's amazing, right? Because that's why gimbal's so awesome, is it's at 25,000 feet. And if you look, like the highest helicopter ever, I think, went to 40,000 feet, and it was specifically designed for that. Or maybe landing on Everest is a big deal, right? 20,000 feet. Helicopters have serious issues in high altitude environments. If you look at all the engineering that was required for the Mars helicopter, right? So, and that's just hovering, not actually flying in a direction. So 35,000 feet, even 25,000 feet, 250 knots for the gimbal is just miraculous. That's what I keep saying, is that thing is, without a doubt, a UAP. There's nothing around it. That's why they never talk about it. That's why AARO hasn't brought it up, is because they have no answer. Their only answer to gimbal can possibly be is, we don't know what the fuck it is. That's their only answer. And then they're going to say, we have no evidence of non-human intelligence, but we don't know what gimbal is, and we don't know how it could possibly be. So what he's saying here is 35,000 feet, 500 knots. You have to see some sort of propulsion from that thing. Like, there's no other, we don't understand, right? It has to have propulsion. Like 35,000 feet, 500 knots. That is really fast. 500 knots is well past supersonic at that altitude. Well past. That might even be Mach 2. Yeah, it's definitely supersonic. So, I mean, to fly that fast, I mean, the F-22 can super cruise. It could probably do that, yeah, but it's still putting out a shit ton of thrust.
In restricted military airspace. Meanwhile, in an adjacent area, and I included in my PowerPoint briefing, you can find videos from the Department of Homeland Security, 9 of them, about some of the strange things that they're seeing on the border. Very, very odd things. Now, this raises a little bit of an issue that I've written about recently also, with the hope that it might prove some assistance to this task force, which is, why isn't the Department of Homeland Security can publish all these videos, but AARO can't and DOD can't? There was a hearing before Congress a few years ago with Mr. Bray from the Navy, and he said, I assure you, I'm going to review these videos and make sure that we get out to you and the public everything we can. I think maybe there's been one video in 3 years since then. When I've looked into this and talked to people at different parts of the federal government and AARO and so forth, they basically said nobody feels it's their job to turn this over to the public. Nobody wants to make the effort to submit it for public release. So back in 2017, I provided 3 unclassified videos to the New York Times. You've all seen those, Gimbal, FLIR, GoFast, right? There are a lot more like that. They just haven't been released because shortly after that, somebody created a classification guide which suddenly said, in contradiction to the executive order on classification signed by the president, that anything, essentially anything having to do with UAP is now suddenly, mystically classified because it might damage national security. Even though...
Like, think about that. Like, who the fuck made that decision, right? Who made that decision? The president says, release it. Congress says, release it. But it's not released. Why? And we don't know who it is. We don't know who signed it. It's just a big joke, man. That's why I freaked out, because I just saw how big a joke it is.
So those 3 videos, the FBI, the Office of Special Investigations, the Air Force investigated, confirmed they were classified. Not only did they not damage national security, they helped national security. They helped raise an awareness for the public and for Congress that we have an air defense problem here. And the scientific community is very eager to get more of those kinds of videos because they want to train AI systems, they want to know what it is we're looking for, they want to measure the signatures. There's a lot they can contribute to this, but the bureaucracy is not responding. And I think I couldn't put a number on it, but I believe that if someone were to poke that system and force them to review that classification guide, if someone were to establish some advocacy for taking that which is truly unclassified, and admittedly, absolutely, there are many things, videos that are appropriately classified, not questioning that. What I am saying is that there are others that fall into this camp that would have value to the public, value to Congress, value to the scientific community, and this is not an expensive proposition. It's just a matter of getting somebody to focus on it and to put these through the process.
But they absolutely do not want that to happen, because you just said it's valuable to. If they release that information, all of a sudden we lose the value, and the rest of the world, particularly our adversaries, gain the value immediately. That's why they don't want to do it. They know what these things are. At least they have a good idea that they're not a threat. They knew back in the 50s, right?
And I think the public not only has a right to know, I think it's beyond that. I think there's a utilitarian function. There's great value in the public knowing this information, value to the scientific community in having this information. I give the example sometimes of what happened was, and I promise I'm going to get off the stage like real fast. I'm starting to fall into my own stuff here that I get into, but the Sputnik program, I have no doubt if they could have kept it secret, the CIA would not have told the American people the Russians had a satellite in orbit.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have had the space program when we did. We wouldn't have gotten to the moon when we did. because the people would have gotten fired up and said, oh my God, this is not acceptable that the Russians are ahead of us and we need to act. And Congress took action.
But the problem is we're going to find out that they've been lying to us and gaslighting us for like 9 decades. That's what we're going to find out. Think about that. Then what will the public think? You're already at 16%. Public already does not trust the government at all. And so it's going to come out. The information is going to come out. There's like, look at all these people, like they're not just going to quit. And now we have decentralized information. That's the thing. Before they could clamp down, right? I'm sure I've been censored without a doubt. Without a doubt. But it doesn't matter. Like you're still getting the information, aren't you? They can't clamp down. It's
action. And it was, it actually, ironically, we ended up collaborating with the Russians in space, and it actually helped from, facilitate some peaceful developments and relations. I think
a better example is when Portugal, I live in Portugal, when they found out how to go around the southern tip of Africa. I think this is a better example. The way they did it is they went way out west, right? Which you wouldn't think. They tried for hundreds of years. All the people in Europe tried for hundreds, maybe thousands of years to just go down the west coast of Africa, but it doesn't work just because the currents of the earth, right? The water would push you back. You could not get it. And anytime you tried to go on the land, you get killed. So what did the Portuguese do? They went way out west, almost all the way to Brazil. And that's how they ended up in Brazil. That's why Brazil speaks Portuguese, because they found they go way out there. They get into the southern currents and it whips them all the way around the southern tip of Africa. That's how you do it. You go way the opposite direction that you think, 90 degrees from where you think. And that allows you to go around. Of course, then they found out they lost many people. It was extremely dangerous, but there's no way in hell, there is no way in God's earth that they told their adversaries how to do that, right? They instantly became the richest country in Europe, instantly. That was their age of riches, right? They had amazing wealth, and they flaunted it like crazy, and that burned them essentially. And they did horrible, horrible things in India and the whole Indian Ocean, that whole area, just pillaged and raped and everything. But there's no way in hell they would tell anyone. And if they told people in the public, that would immediately get to their adversaries. And so that's why they didn't tell anyone. That's why Spain didn't know how to go over there. That's why Spain thought in 1492, right, that they had reached India. It was just the 1500s they went around the southern coast. So, or late 1400s, the same time. So they did not frickin' tell anybody. And that's the same thing now. There's no way they are going to give this information freely. And the reason is it's too valuable. They're gaining something from it. They're using the tech. They have to be. And they're trying to solve it. Their argument is, we are looking at it. We do have our best scientists looking at it. But the problem is they're not making serious headway. And if they are, they're keeping it so secret, super secret now that it's all bottled up, right? The government's going to screw it away. That's why you need commercial interests, like you mentioned there.
There are a lot of benefits along those lines that they could accrue, but it's going to take some effort and on the part of Congress, I think, to compel this to happen if it's going to happen. So with that, I will close and thank our congressional sponsors for taking an interest in this and giving us the opportunity to express our concerns and share what we've learned thus far about this problem. Thank you.
Can I ask a 5-second question? This high-resolution 4K videos of UAP, is this stuff that you know about, or is this stuff that you've seen?
Well, there's some stuff that I've seen and I've asked about, and I think there's one video I've seen that they're going to declassify. And I hope that happens. It wasn't I would say it was 4K. It was more like what you've seen, is infrared sensor, gun camera video along the lines of what the New York Times published, and the Washington Post subsequently. So it's that kind of video from that sensor system.
So we know it exists, it's there.
Oh, yeah. And now, by the way, we're at a point now where the AARO has received somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,800 military reports.
No, there's no
1,800
evidence.
in just the last few years. Some of those are iPhone videos, so I don't think there's a big sources of methods issue there. There's a variety of, some are from, stuff you get at Best Buy from sailors on the ship with a video camera on the deck. There's gotta be a number in that mix
Research.
that could be revealed. And beyond that, as I said, I think there's a lot of high caliber sensor data. The American people have already paid for many of these sensors. They're out there, many of them, and they're collecting pertinent data. Avi Dr. Loeb has benefited from the data that had to do with the reentry of the interstellar vehicle. There was a great example of a taxpayer-funded system that contributed to science in a very meaningful way. I'm here to tell you, I think there's a lot more of that kind of thing that could be made available if someone did a thorough assessment of the sensor systems that we have and what they're collecting, and took a hard look at the classification issues. We also had a system, precedent ones, where we cleared for global warming some scientists to look at some classified data related to that scientific problem set, and that's conceivably another, there's problems with that because scientists want to be able to publish, of course. They want their colleagues to be able to see everything possible about the sources, but there are a variety of opportunities I think we're missing. At the same time, there's a huge national security issue here. And we've got stuff in our skies, some of it could represent technological surprise that we need to find out about. And you've got these unmanned systems at 35,000 feet, that's a mile higher than the top of Mount Everest, going 500 miles an hour.
Yep.
In restricted military airspace. I would say we've got a lot of work to do.
Well, thank you, Chris. Justice, I do not have the advantage of height that you do, so I have to bring this way
It's
down.
got big arms though.
I think Chris brings up a very good point. And the reason why I decided to share this photograph with you, taken from a civilian pilot now, is because the same challenges that our pilots or military pilots are facing as to where to report it, who's going to analyze it, what do you do with the information, multiply that for the civilian aviation community. Do they report to the FAA? Do they report to NORA? Maybe the Air Force? Maybe a civilian organization, right? Who's responsible for getting this information out? Again, let me caveat, this has not been vetted. This was taken by a civilian pilot. But once again, you would think this information would be important for somebody to look at. Certainly someone in government, certainly some of our representatives that are sitting here, right? These are over sensitive military installations. Whose are they? What are their capabilities? What are the intent? Right? But enough of me right now. Let's go on to our second expert here, Mr. Kirk McConnell. I could sit here all day. Once again, these guests are just unbelievable. Kirk, my question is for you, and I'm going to go off script here for a minute. You have deep expertise and experience with the Senate Armed Services Committee. What is right now the greatest challenge you see for our Congress to tackle this topic on behalf of the American people? What is, if you had to narrow it down to one to three challenges, especially for our reps here that are sitting with us here today so patiently, what would be, in your estimate, the three greatest challenges facing Congress tackling this topic?
Well, I would speculate. I'm not an elected official.
Can you all hear back there? No. Okay, let's go ahead.
We're on your left. How's that? I certainly don't want to speak for Congress. You know, I do want to mention that I did serve 37 years as a staff member on Capitol Hill for Senate Armed Services Committee and both the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. I was not in the military. You got that wrong. So I've been up here a long time, but I have no voting card. Never have. I have tremendous respect for the institution, and I don't intend to reveal sort of inside baseball information. You know, what I would say is, on a topic like this, my sense is that Congress needs a lot of confidence to push really vigorously. And where are they going to get that confidence that there is an absolute assurance that there's a reality here? And I think as much evidence as has been accumulated in the public domain over such a long period of time, it is subject to question. And we all know how that has proceeded over the period of decades. The key to this, in my opinion, is firsthand sources who can testify to direct involvement in this so-called legacy program of crash retrievals, reverse engineering. Unfortunately, there are people out there, I believe, from many reports, that are interested in coming forward and telling their story, but they are very much intimidated and frightened about doing that. They're afraid of the consequences, including their own personal safety, is what they relate. Their personal safety, certainly their career, starting with their security clearances, which is the means that they have to make a living. And they have observed some folks who have come forward, not to mention you, Lou, and Dave Brush, and have seen what those folks have gone through, and most of them say, yeah, I'm not doing that. So I think we're sort of in a tough situation. It's almost like, you know, catch-22. We need more primary sources, but it's hard to get people with that kind of information to come forward because of the fear of retaliation.
We need a better whistle.
Yeah, and basically Jake Barber comes out and he totally gets hammered even by the community. It's just so ridiculous that I still think these people need to come out. I mean, what are you going to go to your deathbed and I don't know, man. Have some guts, man. Have some integrity. I don't know. Like Matthew Brown, man. Let's see it. Dude's legit, man. David Crush. These guys are legit. People are going to come. They know it's bullshit. It's ridiculous.
Sir, that's something that I'm sure, as you know, has been discussed in both the Senate and the House.
Why don't you draw me something up really tight?
Yes, sir. So, whistleblower protections is, and you know, finding ways to even compensate them if they do have negative consequences from coming forward, and so forth. So I certainly think this is a major factor. I would just let you ask the next question.
Absolutely, Chris, please jump in.
Yeah, so there was, I came prepared to address that issue as well. And I came prepared to contribute what I could to that question as well. But the classified session was canceled. I think due to the sensitivity of the names of the individuals and so forth. didn't think it was appropriate to, those ones I could do it in an unclassified setting. If they do reschedule a classified setting, I think I'm more than happy to try to provide some specifics. I published a signal message I received from a very senior government official. He described a specific Secretary of the Air Force memorandum. He described a specific recovery site. He named the Air Force gatekeeper for the program.
Those protected.
Nobody from Congress has asked me to follow up on that. I have all that information. I was prepared to share what I could about that, but I don't know that it would be definitive or lead to any conclusion. But I do think those names, due to the privacy concerns of the individuals and so forth, obviously it's very sensitive. So I'm prepared to try to help with that as I can as well. But in this session, I wanted to address some of these other issues related to declassification.
Let me ask a general question to either of you. What are the consequences, and either or both of you can answer, what are the consequences of Congress not taking action on this topic from a national security perspective?
Well, you heard Dr. Eric Davis expressing his understanding of the state of affairs in this arena, which is that the program, the legacy program, call it that, has been sort of stalled. That we're not making the best use of, allegedly, we're not making the best use of the best minds in the country. The compartmentalization allegedly has prevented the kind of coordination and collaboration between scientists to really crack this very difficult set of physics problems. I'm sure that the security element that's had to be applied to this activity has come with a lot of costs in terms of effectively managing the program. And it is alleged that this even extends within the executive branch, that very senior leaders in the executive branch aren't aware of this and are not managing the effort. So it's not a leap or a stretch to suppose that we're hampering ourselves immensely by this continued compartmentation. And certainly Congress does not know whether this activity is being managed appropriately or not. We don't know if it's got the right level of resources, if it's got the right management structure, the right incentives, and so on and so forth. We think our government can work pretty well when we're managing things according to the rules. So I think that this is a detriment to national security, the lack of oversight and awareness. It's certainly possible to keep appropriately classified things classified and still have effective oversight and management both in the executive branch and Congress.
Speaking of keeping national security and secrets classified, which I completely agree with. There are very specific reasons why you want to keep certain aspects of this topic classified, sources and methods, etc., maybe certain capabilities. But let me ask, this is a question probably for you, Mr. Mellon. In your opinion, what are the
Mr. Mellon.
I'm
When did I become Mr. Mellon?
Well, because the fact I'm not wearing a tie, I have to make up for it somewhere.
Okay.
So I've already been accused of being
He's not used to seeing me in a suit.
too casual and too lax, so I'm trying to be more formal here. Chris, in your opinion, what are the consequences of retroactively classifying information previously unclassified, and are you aware of any specific incidents of information or data that was once unclassified that is now classified?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Lou, I think there's piles of that stuff. And I think there's so much of it, it's kind of hard to gauge what the consequences are. Because my understanding is that they adopted the classification guide, which basically says anything and everything to do with UAP is classified hereforth. Now, people who haven't read the executive order may not be aware. The executive order says, when in doubt, you should err on the side of going unclassified. You're supposed to err on the side of transparency and openness to the American people. And when we're talking about many of these videos, if an F-18 at-FLIR targeting pod video was unclassified in 2017, and we're not talking about denied area or some other unusual exception, how could it be classified 2 years when you take the same video from the same system in the same area 2 years later?
It's total bullshit.
I don't get it. But that looks like what they did. And it avoids, it's typical, you know, I argued vociferously against it at the time. I knew some of the people involved and tried to make the argument to them, guys, you wouldn't even be here. We wouldn't be having a discussion if information hadn't gotten into the public domain via Congress and the press. And
that's the only reason.
That's why we've made the progress we've made to date. And now you want to drop a curtain on everything? What do I don't get it. So I can't really gauge the implications, but I do think they're negative, and I think it's inappropriate, and it's probably unlawful.
My last question here before we move to a very short break for the next panel. I want to be respectful of time of both the congressional members and, of course, our panelists as well. This next question goes to you, Kirk. You mentioned a little bit about whistleblowers, and I know that, from my understanding, and you don't have to talk about it, but I know you received classified briefings before on this topic from specific subject matter experts and some of your colleagues. What can Congress do, specifically members such as Rep. Burlison, Rep. Burchett, Rep. Luna, their colleagues, to better protect whistleblowers, to incentivize individuals to come forward and provide, at a minimum, unclassified information in a way that they don't have to worry about retribution to their careers and perhaps much worse, and classified information in the proper venue? What can Congress do to help improve that flow of information and minimize the reprisals that some of us have faced in the past?
Lou, I would first off like to say that there is an option, like people who do come forward and want to talk to committees in Congress don't have to go public. They can and have come to the Armed Services Committees, the Intelligence Committees, and in confidence, on a classified basis, have related what they know and what their experiences can. The members who have received that kind of accounts and witness statements have protected the identity of such people, and they have thereby been protected. The negative side of that is that the members can't go around and tell their colleagues what they have learned, because that risks the identity of people that have come forward in confidence, and therefore it doesn't empower members to then proselytize and get everyone geared up to really make a strong investigatory push. But it is an option for people to consider.
I think it's a super powerful option. They can verify their identity. They can verify who they are. Go to Congress. If you are one of these people, go to Burlison, man. That dude is legit. Go to Tim Burchett. You know he's going to protect you. Tell him you're involved. I mean, Jake Mellon did that. And remember, the senator said, hey, how do I get protection? They asked Jake. So
I would also say that we have a gentleman here in the audience who has conducted a legal history of people who come forward to make classified statements to Congress over a long period of time. And he tells me that he can't find an instance where someone coming forward and giving classified information to Congress without sort of formal permission from the executive branch, that there's never been, I hope I'm getting this right, there's never been an indictment or much less a prosecution for doing that. Now, I certainly, I'm no lawyer, and I certainly don't want to encourage people to sort of break the rules as they see, as they understand them, and what they're bound to by agreements that they sign. But it is at least something to think about, and potentially act on. That obviously takes a lot of courage to do that.
Yep.
I'd just like to, this is a little bit of a non sequitur, but our panel's coming to an end, and I did want to share a concern I have, which is that we have two different issues here. We have UAP objects that we're observing in flight, active around military facilities, and we have an issue of possible recovery of materials. These two issues in the public mind are blended. It's entirely possible that we might not have recovered materials, but UAP are very real. And here addressing, and it's an urgent issue. And I have a concern that if that issue is not in some way validated or addressed, it runs the risk of discrediting the entire topic. And we've made enormous progress. Nothing happened essentially from the Blue Book days until 2017. And I fear that if there isn't some effective way of addressing this, that we run the risk of a major setback. I don't know how secure AARO is in the long term. I'm not seeing interest on the part of the chairman of the committees that fund it, on the Armed Services and Intelligence committees. They don't seem to be engaged or supportive at this point for a defensive approach. So I think we're in somewhat tenuous ground. Kirk might be probably in a better position to address this than me, but I think that the second thing that Paul Smith, if you were to confirm that, then how do you manage that? Who deals with that? It's such a transformational issue that it cannot be a press release that comes out from from Congress some afternoon, Friday afternoon or something. It's a literally cosmic issue that runs the risk of having terrifying tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people, frankly. So it's a very complex, interrelated set of issues, and I think we and whoever in Congress is providing oversight of this really needs to think through how to handle the two of those things. And our foundation obviously wants to help if we can, but I think it's a tough challenge for members who are very, very busy people with a lot on their plates, and a complex one.
I'm going to make an exception. I'm going to continue this conversation because there's a question I want to ask. It's very, very important related to with their expertise. Go ahead, Kirk.
Well, I wanted to get to the question that you actually asked me, which is about whistleblower protections. And I'm by no means an expert or even really conversant on the topic of whistleblower protections. But you know, applying a common sense kind of standard, you know, you need to have legislation that that really is strong. You know, there's a long record of whistleblowers, despite whistleblower protections in the law, they get retaliated against, and they.
Yeah, I had John Kiriakou on the show. I mean, if you haven't watched that interview, it didn't get many views, but it's unbelievable. I mean, they were obviously torturing people, and the U.S. literally wrote the Geneva Conventions against torture, and all those fucks in the CIA knew that, right? They knew the law of armed conflict, like we knew the law of armed conflict, like, and they still were just torturing people. It's ridiculous. And he was the only one that spoke up. Like, he thought someone else would speak up. He's like, surely someone would speak up about this. And then no one did, and no one did, and still no one did. So he spoke up about it. And what did they do? They literally put him in jail for 2 years on just some bullshit trumped up charge. Like, it was just a total made up charge. Like, he explains it in the interview. He was talking to a journalist, and the journalist said, "Oh, do you know this guy, John Deere?" And John Kiriakou said, "Oh, I don't know. I think he may have been at this desk when I was there in Pakistan or something in 2009." That's it. That's what he said. It never went public. The journalist never published it. And they put him in jail for 2 years because of that. And the only reason they did that is because he was talking about them torturing everybody. You know, it's just the same things going on. And yeah, it's just ridiculous. Like, what are you going to be remembered for? Like, you're going to look back. Like, that's what people don't get. Like, if you're not living your life to the fullest, then what are you doing? Like, what's the point? Like, you're on your deathbed. What are you going to be happy about? I'm glad I made that retirement. Like, everybody works so hard to get to their retirement, and then they're old and they end up dying, right? I just don't get it. Like, Matthew Brown gets it. Like, the younger people will get it. Like, it is going to come out. These people, bunch of cowards is what it comes down to. Like, it's easy to be the special forces guy. That's what I learned. Like, you look up and you're like, oh, special forces, they're so badass. It's easy to be the Air Force pilot up 28,000 feet, right? Where they can't shoot at me and drop bombs on people. Yeah. Okay, what about the dude out in the street who's just in uniform, right? And walking around in uniform and just hoping to not get shot? Like, that's the dude it's hard to be, not the people in the CIA who are torturing people and scared to show their faces. It's going to come out. Like,
they lose their jobs, they lose their careers, and it
So
happens with enough regularity that no one could blame people for not wanting to risk it. So the legislation would need to be very robust, and I think it would need to include things like restitution, the possibility of the government making good on the loss of their career, loss of security clearances.
Like,
if it comes to
think how much better we would do, right? If instead of using $1 billion for some new asset so that Avi Loeb could try and find something, what if you just paid those whistleblowers $1 billion? Think of that, $1 billion. All we would need is 100 million, like Avi says. How much information will we get? They should just put out a freaking reward just to pay for information. Like, that's what it should be.
And making making sure that that people are not going to suffer these consequences, even though the law says they should never have suffered those consequences. You got to clean up the mess.
Obviously, they don't follow the law.
That tends to happen. So anyway, I limit myself to those.
So one last question. I know you said it before. I'm going to, again, break the rule here real quick, but I'm going to ask you very quickly. Let's try to, if we can, make questions, but try to keep it succinct if we can. And this is for both of you. And I think this is part of the challenge that Congress faces, okay? So we all want to protect national security. How do you separate protecting Blue Force technologies, perhaps, hypothetically, gained from the insights of UAP recovery programs, but at the same time leveling with the American people about the reality, the fundamental reality that we do not have a current understanding of everything in our sky, right? Our U.S. air domain awareness, we do not have a complete sight picture. And two, that there may be technologies that are not from us and that warrant further investigation, again, but at the same time protecting if we have any technologies, hypothetically, that have been developed as a result.
Well, Lou, we heard from Dr. Davis and many others who believe that we haven't made much progress with respect to deciphering what the physics are behind NHI and these craft that are coming here. At the same time, we don't really know that is true. We haven't made progress. Maybe we've made great progress, and that we have stuff ourselves that could be pretty marvelous, right? And certainly there can be absolutely vital reasons for protecting that kind of information. One thought that is crossed my mind is, people say, if the United States government has been into this, why in the world wouldn't the government have made these kinds of technologies known for the betterment of our citizens?
Because they never have.
And one thought is like, what if once you understand the science, what if the engineering? I know
it's not that hard.
Eric Davis thinks that we're maybe 1,000 years from being able to do this, but what if it's not true? And the government is on the horns of a dilemma. Like, it's got energy sources that might be an absolute boon to mankind, but it also is looking at the weaponization of that, and it's terrifying. And so, is there a way that you can exploit that for your own benefit militarily, but keeping this thing somehow, this genie bottled up?
You can't. That's what I believe is you can't, because once you say that it's real, what they're going to realize is that our physics and our understanding, our perspective is totally effed. And then once you see that it's possible using this other manner, that's why Tesla's work was all classified. I think the engineering is not the difficult part, right? Is knowing that you're totally effed. It was difficult to go around the southern tip of Africa, but it was impossible to go along the coast. It was difficult to go out west, but it was definitely possible, right? Going along the coast, right along the coast of Africa was impossible. So once you had the information, then it was totally possible. All of a sudden now Spain can get around the southern tip. So anyone could. That's why they keep it. They can't release anything because they'll look like total assholes for lying to us for 90 years and keeping it secret at their own to gain power for their own nation. And then at the same point, they can't release. As soon as they release it, then that will let everyone else know that it's possible and break the seal. You can't keep the genie in the bottle, basically.
Doesn't come into the hands of a North Korean dictator. I don't have answers. Lou, I think you've got to deal with this range of possibilities. But the first thing you got to do is understand it. Like we have to understand what the government knows. And until we do, it's going to be hard to develop a rational strategy for managing this. I don't know if that's something else.
Chris?
I think we can manage it. I'll leave it at that. I've said too much already. And I'm eager to get off the stage and turn it over to others.
All right, folks, 3 minutes. Thank you very much for coming.
So that hearing was just amazing. Thought it was unbelievable. I think I had my mic on mute the last several minutes. Rookie. I really enjoyed this hearing setup. I thought this was amazing. There he is, Ryan Graves out there. Keith Taylor. Remember Tim Burchett was taking a selfie. I saw him taking a selfie, and Tim was taking a selfie with Keith. Chris is still talking to this dude. I don't know if you guys know who that guy is. I thought this hearing format was amazing. You know, the other one, the hearing I was at, it was super hardcore. It was like high tension, everybody recorded, you know, swearing oaths, and then it's timed. Like you had all the political BS, like the Congress people coming in, and a lot of them asking really good questions, but then the political showboating, all the cameras. So, I mean, I thought it was great to get like exposure out there, but I think this is so much better. Like just super chill, getting the information out. Lou Elizondo's running it. Man, how awesome is that? Like Lou's asking all the questions, directing it. Eric Davis just casually answering like, oh yeah, of course we have craft. Unbelievable. So I really like this setup. Can you imagine David Grush asking all those questions? So we heard some great information, and I know I had Mike on the show, and this is going to be the innovation panel. And so I have to go. I have 3 kids. I need to take care of them. It's a holiday here, and my wife is not here. And so it's already been over 3 hours. But I really like this setup. Mike, what he's going to say is he's going to talk about being part of the NASA independent study team, and that what he really wants is for NASA to go back and look in the archived data and just do a systematic search of all the data they have that is already public. He's going to talk about that. And the second thing he's going to say is the aviation safety reporting system, that we should use that. And that's great because, again, it can keep your name confidential. So you can be anonymous and we can get like real serious data. But I think highlighted on this is there's tons of information. The U.S. government surely knows, elements of the government know, the military industrial complex knows what these things are, at least that they're not a serious threat. They haven't been for many years. If they don't know exactly what they are, they don't know necessarily how they work. But that doesn't mean you can't use the technology, right? And that's what Jake Barber argued, is that they are using the technology. They know how to use it. They don't know why it works. Just like the same thing, like I could fly a plane. I did fly the plane. I don't know why the plane flies. You know, I know how it flies technically. I know what this goes in there, that goes there. These are all the systems, but we don't know why electricity works. We don't know why gravity works. We don't know why space-time is a thing, right? We don't know why it can warp space. So I think it's just a matter of time. Yeah, and we talked about whistleblowers. I think that's super important. Like, imagine if you, instead of spending $100 million for Avi's program, right? What if you spend $100 million just to pay whistleblowers for information? Like, think how much we would learn immediately if you just paid. If you had $100 million slush fund for whistleblowers, like that should it be? It should be the whistleblower disclosure fund, and all we do is pay whistleblowers to go to Congress, right? Keep it classified. Congress can vet them if you really want to find out. And so I thought all of these discussions were amazing. I can't wait to see what is actually reported in the press. I think this is perfect. I hope so many whistleblowers must have watched this, right? People on the legacy program have to have watched this. So I think that's just amazing. And look at John Kiriakou, right? He was only one whistleblower who was tough enough to actually do it. Everyone around him, all the other people in the CIA, hopefully I wasn't on mute when I went on that whole tangent. I may have been 3 hours. Everyone around him did not think it was something wrong, right? That they weren't doing something wrong with torture. And meanwhile, it was complete BS. But he said, right? He said that, look, it made me everything I am today. And if I went back in time, I would not do anything different. And I would speak out about it. And I hope other people see that, other whistleblowers see that, because like they talked about, their job, their career, all that stuff. Like, I mean, it's easy to say, right? I have a pension. You know, live outlandishly, but I also don't have to go and work. I've set it up so I don't have to, but why do they stop? Like, you're going to die. It doesn't matter. It's all temporary. Like, what really matters is what you do when you have your time here. That's what matters. So, I mean, if you're not living life to the fullest, then honestly, what the fuck are you doing? That would be my question. That is my tip. Thank you for supporting me. This is the secret tip you get is go and live life to the fullest. And that means don't be scared to do what is required. Like, you are going to die. Like, it is just a matter of time. Get over it. And before you were dead, everything was fine. Like, whatever. After you're dead, everything will be fine. Like, pain is transitory. Like, yeah. So, anyway. Peace.